Lillian Drake had built an empire on control, precision, and never trusting anyone. But on the night her entire world nearly collapsed, the person who stopped it wasn't her security team, her lawyers, or her board of directors. It was a janitor, a single father pushing a cleaning cart who saw what no one else did. This is the story of how the most invisible man in the building became the only one she could trust, and how two broken people found something worth rebuilding together. If you want to see where this story goes, stay until the end. Hit like and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The conference room on the 47th floor smelled like expensive leather and desperation. Lillian Drake sat at the head of the table, spine straight, fingers laced together on the polished mahogany surface. She'd learned a long time ago that if you showed weakness for even a second, someone would take it from you. The men around the table, because they were mostly men, always had been, watched her with varying degrees of calculation. Some wanted the deal. Some wanted her to fail. A few probably wanted both. "Ms. Drake," said Gerald Hathaway from across the table, his voice smooth as oil on glass. "We're not asking for much. Just transparency. Assurance that your systems are secure before we move forward with the merger." Lillian didn't blink. "My systems have been audited 3 times in the past 6 months. You've seen the reports." "Independently audited," Gerald corrected. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "By firms you selected." She wanted to tell him to go to hell. Wanted to stand up, walk out, let the whole deal burn. But that wasn't how you stayed on top. That wasn't how you protected what you'd built from nothing while people like Gerald inherited their positions from their fathers. "Fine," she said. Her voice could have cut glass. "One more audit, but we're not delaying the signing. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., or the offer expires." Gerald exchanged glances with the other board members. Lillian knew what they saw. A woman in her mid-30s who'd climbed too high too fast, who didn't know when to bend. Let them think that. She'd been underestimated before. "Tomorrow night," Gerald agreed. "But if there's any irregularity, there won't be." The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Lillian stayed in her chair as the others filed out, their footsteps muffled by carpet that cost more per square foot than most people made in a week. When the door finally closed, she let herself exhale. Her assistant, Monica, appeared in the doorway. "Your car is waiting." "I'm staying." Monica's eyebrows rose slightly. "It's almost midnight." "I'm aware." "Ms. Drake, I need to go through the security protocols one more time. Make sure everything is airtight before tomorrow." Lillian opened her laptop, the blue glow harsh against her face. "You can go home. I'll be fine." Monica hesitated, then nodded. She knew better than to argue. Everyone did. The building emptied slowly. Lillian heard the distant ding of elevators, the murmur of goodbyes, the gradual settling of a structure built to house ambition. By 12:30, the only sound was the hum of the HVAC system and the quiet click of her keyboard. She pulled up the security audit reports, scanning through pages of technical jargon and reassuring green checkmarks. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect, maybe, but that's what she paid people for. Perfection. No room for error, no space for weakness. The cleaning crew arrived around 1 a.m. Lillian barely noticed. They were background noise, invisible in the way that people who cleaned up after the important ones always were. She'd worked as a waitress once, putting herself through business school. She remembered what it felt like to be looked through instead of at. She was deep in a particularly dense section about firewall protocols when she heard the cartwheels squeaking down the hallway. The sound got closer, then stopped just outside the conference room. The door opened. "Oh," the voice was male, surprised. "Sorry, I didn't know anyone was still here." Lillian glanced up. The janitor stood in the doorway, one hand on a cleaning cart. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair that needed a trim and eyes that looked tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. He wore the standard gray uniform that all the maintenance staff wore, a name tag that said Ethan pinned slightly crooked on his chest. "It's fine," she said, already looking back at her screen. "Do what you need to do." He hesitated. She could feel him still standing there. "I can come back," he offered. "I said it's fine." He wheeled the cart in quietly. Lillian tried to focus on the report in front of her, but some part of her brain tracked his movements, the way he emptied the trash without letting the bag rustle too much. The careful placement of cleaning supplies on the far end of the table so they wouldn't be in her way. Most of the cleaning crew just did the job. This one seemed to be trying not to exist. She was 3 paragraphs into a section on encryption standards when she heard his footsteps getting closer to her end of the table. Not directly toward her, but close enough that her shoulders tensed automatically. "Excuse me." His voice was quiet. "I just need to—" That's when it happened. The cartwheel caught on something, a power cable maybe, or just the edge of the carpet. Ethan lunged to steady it, but the water bucket on top tilted, tipped, and went over the edge in what felt like slow motion. "No," he started to say. The water hit Lillian's laptop like a small waterfall. For a second, nobody moved. Lillian stared at the cascade of liquid pouring across her keyboard, soaking into the ventilation slits, pooling around the base of the screen. Then the screen flickered, went black. "What the hell?" She shoved her chair back, but it was too late. The damage was done. "What the hell did you just do?" "I'm so sorry." Ethan was already reaching for towels from his cart, his face pale. "I didn't mean the wheel caught. Do you have any idea—" Lillian's voice rose despite herself. All that control, all that careful composure cracking like ice. "That laptop has everything on it. The merger documents, the security protocols, the—" She stopped, because the screen wasn't black anymore. It was flickering. Lines of code scrolled across it too fast to read. Not the familiar blue error screen of a water-damaged computer. Something else. Something that made the back of her neck prickle. "What?" she started. "Don't touch it." Ethan's voice was sharp, completely different from the apologetic tone of a moment ago. He moved around the table, not toward her, but toward the laptop, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Don't touch anything." "Excuse me?" He didn't answer. His hands moved across the keyboard with surprising speed, water be damned. The code on the screen changed, shifted, stabilized into something almost readable. Lillian's anger shifted into something colder. "What are you doing? Get away from my—" "You have a data breach in progress." Ethan's voice was calm now, focused. "Right now. Active. Someone's pulling encrypted files from your server." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "That's impossible. We have—" "I know what you have. Firewalls, intrusion detection, the works. They're bypassing all of it." He typed something else, and the screen filled with what looked like a network map. "See that? That's your backup server. They've been siphoning data for at least the past hour." Lillian's mind raced. "How do you—" "If I hadn't spilled that water, your laptop would have finished uploading your security protocols directly to whoever's on the other end of this connection." He looked up at her for the first time, and his eyes were nothing like the tired janitor who'd walked in 10 minutes ago. "The water shorted the upload, interrupted the connection. If I hadn't done that, you'd have lost everything by morning." The conference room felt very small suddenly, very quiet. "Who are you?" Lillian's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Right now?" Ethan glanced back at the screen. "I'm the guy who just saved your company." He pulled a phone from his pocket. Not a company phone, something older and battered, and started typing. "But in about 30 seconds, your security team is going to get an alert about unusual network activity, and they're going to come up here, and you need to decide right now whether you believe me or not." "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm still here." He met her eyes again. "If I was part of this, I'd have run the second that water hit. Instead, I'm showing you exactly what's happening and how deep it goes." Lillian's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. "Show me." Ethan pulled out the chair next to hers, the one Gerald had been sitting in during the meeting, and turned the laptop so they could both see the screen. Water still dripped from the edges, but somehow the machine was still running. "This is your network traffic," he said, pointing to a series of flowing lines. "Normal usage looks like this, steady, predictable. But see this spike? That started about an hour ago. Someone opened a backdoor connection through your VPN. Our VPN is secure. It was secure until someone who already had admin credentials used them to create a secondary tunnel." His fingers moved across the keyboard. "They've been careful. Slow data transfer. Nothing that would trigger automatic alerts. But they got greedy tonight. Started pulling bigger files." "What files?" "Your R&D database, patent applications, the merger documents." He pulled up another window. "And the audit report you were just reading. The one that says everything is secure." Lillian's stomach dropped. The audit was compromised? I don't know yet, but whoever's doing this knew exactly when you'd be reviewing those files. They timed the data pull to coincide with your session, probably hoping any unusual activity would get lost in your legitimate access. The elevator dinged in the distance. Footsteps, rapid and multiple, coming down the hallway. "That's security," Ethan said. He didn't sound worried. "They got the alert." Lillian stood up. Her mind was working again, running through scenarios and consequences and probabilities. "If what you're saying is true," it is, "then someone inside my company has been planning this for months. The timing, the access, the knowledge of when I'd be here alone." She stopped, looked at him. "How did you know?" "Know what?" "That there was a breach. How did a janitor notice something my entire IT department missed?" For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not quite guilt, but close. "I'm not just a janitor." Clearly. The footsteps were closer now. Ethan closed the laptop carefully despite the water damage. "When they get here, they're going to want to detain me. Probably you too, for protocol. Don't let them restart this machine. Don't let anyone touch it except your most trusted IT person. And don't tell them what I showed you until you verified it independently." "Why not?" "Because if I'm right, the person who set this up is someone with high-level access. Someone you trust. And until you know who, everyone's a suspect." The conference room door burst open. 4 security guards, hands on their holsters, eyes scanning the room with professional paranoia. Ms. Drake, the lead guard, Henderson, looked between her and Ethan. "We got an alert about a security breach originating from this room." "I'm aware," Lillian said. Her voice was steady again, back in control. "This man discovered it." Henderson's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, with respect, that man is a member of the cleaning crew. He shouldn't have access to—" "He saved my laptop from water damage," Lillian interrupted smoothly, "and while doing so, noticed unusual activity on the screen. I'll need my IT director up here immediately." "Ma'am, protocol requires that we detain anyone who opamti mochins." "I'm aware of protocol, Henderson. I wrote it." She picked up her phone, still dry on the far end of the table. "But right now, I need you to secure this room and make sure nobody else comes in until my IT director arrives. Can you do that?" Henderson hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He gestured to Ethan. "But he stays where we can see him." "Fine." 2 guards positioned themselves by the door. The other 2 stood on either side of Ethan, not quite touching him, but making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. Ethan didn't seem bothered. He'd sat back down in Gerald's chair, hands visible on the table, expression neutral. Lillian made 3 phone calls. The first was to her IT director, Marcus, pulling him out of whatever he was doing at 1:30 in the morning. The second was to her head of legal, because if this was what she thought it was, she'd need lawyers yesterday. The third was to her personal security consultant, the one she kept off the books for situations exactly like this. Then she waited. Marcus arrived in 15 minutes, which meant he'd broken several traffic laws getting there. He was in his 40s, balding, with the kind of permanent caffeine tremor that came from 30 years in IT. He took one look at the water-damaged laptop and went pale. "Ms. Drake, what happened?" "There was an accident," Lillian said. "But before you deal with that, I need you to check something. Ethan," she gestured to the janitor who was still sitting calmly between 2 security guards. "Thinks we have an active data breach. Can you verify that?" Marcus shot Ethan a look that was half skepticism, half concern. "I'd need to access the network monitor." "Do it." Marcus pulled out his tablet, fingers flying across the screen. Lillian watched his expression change from doubt to confusion to something close to panic. He looked up. "There's an unauthorized data transfer in progress. How did you—" He looked at Ethan. "How did you know?" "I saw the traffic pattern on Ms. Drake's laptop before it went down," Ethan said. His voice was still calm, still steady. "Looks like someone's pulling files through a VPN tunnel. Started about 90 minutes ago." Marcus's hands were shaking now. "That's impossible. We have intrusion detection that should have caught this immediately." "Unless someone with admin access disabled it," Ethan said, "or configured it to ignore this specific connection." The color drained from Marcus's face. "That would require root access, I know." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Which means it's someone internal, Someone you trust. Lillian felt the weight of it settling over the room. Marcus, can you trace where the data's going? Marcus's fingers moved frantically across his tablet. I can try, but if they're using encryption and routing it through, give me a few minutes. Those few minutes felt like hours. Lillian stood by the window, looking down at the city spread out below. All those lights, all those people going about their lives, completely unaware that 47 floors up, someone's empire was cracking at the foundations. Ms. Drake, Marcus's voice was tight. I found the destination server. He paused. It's registered to Hathaway Enterprises. The bottom dropped out of Lillian's stomach. Gerald Hathaway. I can't confirm it's him specifically, but the server belongs to his company. And the data being transferred, Marcus scrolled through his tablet. It's everything. Your R&D files, the merger documents, employee records, financial projections. How long has this been going on? Based on the logs, Marcus's voice cracked slightly. At least 6 months, maybe longer. They've been careful, taking small amounts at regular intervals. Tonight's transfer was different, bigger, like they were trying to grab everything before the merger went through, Lillian finished. Her voice was ice. Before I signed over partial control and they lost their access. She turned to look at Ethan. He was still sitting there, hands on the table, expression unreadable. The security guards flanking him looked uncertain now, like they weren't sure if they were guarding a suspect or a witness. You knew, Lillian said. When you walked in here tonight, you knew there was something wrong. Ethan held her gaze. I suspected. How? I've been watching network traffic patterns for the past 3 months. He paused. Part of what I do. I noticed anomalies, small things that didn't quite fit. Tonight the pattern changed, accelerated, so I made sure I was assigned to this floor. You made sure? Lillian's mind was racing. Janitors don't assign their own floors. No, Ethan agreed. They don't. Henderson stepped forward. Ms. Drake, I think we need to take this man in for questioning. He's admitted to saving my company. Lillian cut him off. Ethan, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer it honestly. All right. Who are you really? The silence stretched. Ethan looked at her, then at Marcus, then at the guards. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 32. I have a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie. And 5 years ago, I was the head of cybersecurity for Redline Technologies. Marcus made a sound like he'd been punched. Redline, that's the company that got destroyed by industrial espionage, Ethan finished. Yes, I was in charge of preventing exactly what happened. I failed. The company went under. 37 people lost their jobs. I lost everything. He paused. Including my wife. She left 6 months after the bankruptcy. Took Sophie with her. It took me 2 years to get joint custody back. Lillian's hands were gripping the window frame so hard her knuckles were white. So you became a janitor? I became invisible, Ethan corrected. Same thing. People don't look at janitors, don't question them, don't wonder why they're in the building at odd hours or why they might be paying attention to things that aren't their business. He met her eyes. I couldn't stop what happened to Redline, but I've been trying to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. By spying on my company? By watching for the same patterns that destroyed mine. And when I saw them, he gestured at the laptop. I tried to stop it. Marcus was staring at his tablet like it might explode. Ms. Drake, we need to shut down the network immediately. Contain the breach. If we shut down now, whoever's on the other end will know we're onto them, Lillian said. Her mind was working in overdrive now, pieces clicking together. They'll destroy evidence, cover their tracks, but they're still transferring data. Let them. She turned to face the room. How much do we have left? Before they finish whatever they started tonight, Marcus checked. At current transfer rates, maybe an hour, 2 at most. Lillian looked at Ethan. Can you trace it? Find out exactly who's pulling the data and how they're doing it? If you give me access to your network monitoring tools, yes, probably. Henderson moved closer. Ms. Drake, with all due respect, this man just admitted to conducting surveillance on your company. We can't afford not to, Lillian interrupted. Marcus, give him access. Limited, monitored, whatever you need to do to feel comfortable. But I want to know who's on the other end of that connection and what their endgame is. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but he'd worked for Lillian long enough to know when she'd made up her mind. Yes, ma'am. He pulled out a spare tablet from his bag, fingers flying across it. But I'm logging everything he does, every keystroke. Good. Lillian turned back to Ethan. You have 1 hour to prove you're telling the truth. If you're lying, if this is some kind of setup. I'm not lying. Ethan took the tablet Marcus handed him. And I'm not going to run. I have a daughter to pick up from school tomorrow afternoon. I'm not going anywhere. That detail, small and human and completely unnecessary, hit harder than Lillian expected. She nodded once, then pulled out her phone to make another call. The next hour was the longest of Lillian's life. She watched Ethan work, his fingers moving across the tablet with the kind of practiced ease that spoke to years of experience. Marcus stood behind him, watching every move, occasionally muttering technical terms that Lillian only half understood. The security guards stayed at their posts, and Henderson called in 2 more as backup, because apparently one janitor required half the night shift to keep contained. Around 2:30, her lawyer arrived. Patricia Chen, sharp-eyed and sharper dressed despite the hour, took in the scene with one sweeping glance. Someone want to tell me why I'm here in the middle of the night? Patricia asked. Lillian gave her the abbreviated version. Patricia's expression didn't change, but her eyes got harder. You're sure about this? As sure as I can be without proof. And him? Patricia nodded toward Ethan. You trust him? Lillian looked at this man who'd walked into her conference room less than 2 hours ago, who'd spilled water on her laptop, who'd somehow seen what nobody else had. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but right now he's the only one who seems to be on my side. Ms. Drake, Ethan's voice cut through the conversation. I found something. Everyone moved closer. Ethan had pulled up a series of connection logs, strings of numbers and codes that meant nothing to Lillian but clearly meant something to Marcus, whose face had gone gray. This is... Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. This is coming from inside the building. Not just inside the building, Ethan corrected. He pulled up another screen. Inside this floor, the connection is routing through the VPN to make it look external, but the actual device initiating the transfer is... He typed something else. Conference room B, 3 doors down from here. Silence. That's impossible, Henderson said. We've had this floor locked down since I arrived. Nobody's come in or out. Nobody human, Ethan agreed, but someone set up an automated system, probably days ago, configured to activate at a specific time, pull specific files and transfer them before anyone noticed. But why tonight? Lillian's mind was racing. Why pull everything tonight if they've been working on this for months? Ethan met her eyes. Because tomorrow night you're signing the merger. And once Hathaway has partial ownership, the internal access they've been using becomes legitimate. They don't need to steal anymore. They'll own it legally. So this is, what? One last big score before they go legit? Or insurance? Patricia cut in. Her lawyer instincts were clearly firing on all cylinders. They take everything tonight. If the merger goes through, great. They own the company anyway. If it doesn't, they have all your intellectual property to sell to the highest bidder. Lillian felt sick. How do we stop it? We don't, Ethan said. We let it finish. Everyone started talking at once. Ethan held up a hand. If we shut it down now, they'll know we caught them. They'll destroy evidence, claim it was a technical glitch, tie this up in court for years. But if we let the transfer complete, he was typing as he talked, fingers flying across the tablet. We can track exactly where it goes, who receives it, and build an airtight case. They'll have all our data, Marcus protested. They'll have data, Ethan corrected. But I can tag it. Embed tracking code that pings us every time someone accesses it. We'll know exactly who opens what files and when. Lillian looked at Patricia. Is that legal? Is corporate espionage legal? Patricia shot back. We're way past legal niceties here, Lillian. The question is whether you want to catch them or just scare them off. Lillian thought about Gerald Hathaway's smile across the conference table. Thought about 6 months of careful planning, of pretending to negotiate in good faith while stealing everything she'd built. Do it, she said to Ethan. Tag the files. The next 20 minutes were tense and silent, except for the sound of typing. Marcus hovered over Ethan's shoulder, checking his work, occasionally nodding or muttering under his breath. Henderson had moved to the door of conference room B, hand on his weapon like the computers inside might suddenly attack. At 3:17 a.m., the transfer completed. "Done," Ethan said. He leaned back in the chair, and for the first time Lillian saw how tired he looked. Not just from the late hour, but from something deeper. Every file they took is now tagged with tracking code. Whoever accesses them will know. "How long before we know where they went?" Patricia asked. "Depends on when they open them. Could be minutes, could be hours." Ethan pulled up a new screen, "But we can see the destination IP address. Want me to trace it?" "Do it," Lillian said. More typing, more waiting. Then Ethan's expression changed. "What?" Lillian moved closer. "What is it?" "The files were transferred to a server registered to Hathaway Enterprises," Ethan said slowly, "but the access credentials used to receive them." He looked up. "They belong to someone in your company." The room went very quiet. "Who?" Lillian's voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan turned the tablet so she could see. The name on the screen felt like a punch to the gut. David Morrison, her chief technology officer, the man she'd trusted with every technical decision for the past 4 years. "No," Marcus said. He'd gone pale. David wouldn't." "The logs don't lie," Ethan said quietly. "He's been accessing the Hathaway server for months, small transfers, careful timing, building up to tonight." Lillian's hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat against the table. "Where is he now?" Henderson was already on his radio. "Security to Morrison's office. Detain him for questioning." The response came back 30 seconds later. "Sir, Morrison's office is empty. Looks like he left around midnight. His security badge shows him exiting the building at 12:47 a.m. Right after the board meeting, right after Lillian had sent everyone home and stayed behind alone." "He knew," Lillian said. The pieces were falling into place now, sharp and painful. "He knew I'd stay late to review the protocols, knew I'd be alone. The whole thing was a setup," Ethan finished. "Get you here. Isolated. Pull the data while you were distracted. By the time you noticed anything wrong, the merger would be signed and the evidence would be buried under layers of corporate bureaucracy." "But you spilled water on my laptop." "But I spilled water on your laptop," Ethan agreed. Lillian looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Not a janitor, not an intruder, just a tired man who'd lost everything once and was trying to make sure someone else didn't have to. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk everything to help me? You don't know me. This isn't your company." "Because I know what it's like to lose it," Ethan said simply. "And because someone should have warned me. Someone should have seen what was happening at Redline and spoken up before it was too late. They didn't. So I'm trying to be the person I needed back then." Henderson's radio crackled. "Sir, we have a situation. Morrison's home address is empty. Looks like he cleared out in a hurry. Neighbors say they saw him loading suitcases into his car around 11 p.m. Before the transfer even started," Patricia noted. "He was gone before the data finished copying. That's premeditation." "That's also evidence," Lillian said. She pulled out her phone. "Henderson, I want every piece of communication between Morrison and Hathaway for the past year. Emails, texts, phone records, everything. Patricia, start drafting an injunction against the merger. I want it filed first thing in the morning." "On what grounds?" "Fraud, industrial espionage, pick one." Lillian's voice was steel now. All the fear, all the uncertainty had crystallized into something sharp and focused. "They wanted to steal my company? Fine. Let's see how well that holds up in court." The next hour was controlled chaos. Phone calls to board members, lawyers, security consultants. Henderson coordinating with local police to put out a bolo on Morrison. Marcus working with Ethan to secure every remaining system, change every password, lock down every access point. Lillian coordinated it all from the conference room, her water-damaged laptop sitting in front of her like evidence at a crime scene. Around 4:30 a.m., Patricia pulled her aside. "You know this is going to get ugly, right? Hathaway has resources. If Morrison turns on them to save himself, maybe we have a shot. But if he runs, then we hunt him with the full force of the law," Lillian said. I didn't build this company from nothing just to watch it get stolen by men who think I'm too weak to fight back. Patricia smiled grimly. Good, because you're going to need that fire. By 5 a.m., the sun was starting to think about rising. The city below was waking up, early commuters starting their day, completely unaware of the corporate war being waged above their heads. Ethan had finished securing the network. He stood by the window now, tablet returned to Marcus, hands in his pockets. The security guards had finally stopped hovering quite so close, though Henderson still watched him with suspicious eyes. Lillian walked over to where he stood. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know what you were expecting when you walked in here tonight, but thank you." Ethan shrugged. "I was expecting to empty some trash cans and maybe run a vacuum. He almost smiled. This was different. I have a lot of questions. I'd be worried if you didn't. Starting with what happens now, with you. Henderson's going to want a full statement. Patricia's going to want you to testify if this goes to court. And She paused. "I need to know if I can trust you." Ethan turned to face her fully. In the early morning light, he looked younger somehow, more human. 5 years ago, I made mistakes that cost 37 people their jobs, he said. I've spent every day since trying to make up for that. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just asking you to let me help finish what we started. And then what? You go back to pushing a cleaning cart? I go back to being a single dad who picks his daughter up from school and helps with homework and pretends that the world isn't full of people like Morrison and Hathaway. He met her eyes. That's all I want. Normal. Invisible. Safe. Lillian understood that. More than he probably realized. How many times had she wanted to just disappear, to walk away from the constant fighting, the endless scrutiny, the weight of everyone's expectations? But she hadn't. And looking at Ethan, she didn't think he would either. "Henderson," she called out. The security chief looked up. "I want a complete background check on Ethan Cole. Everything, work history, references, credit report, the works, by noon today." "Yes, ma'am." She turned back to Ethan. "You're not leaving this building until I know exactly who you are. But if everything checks out, if you are who you say you are," she paused, "I'm going to need someone I can trust, someone who sees the patterns nobody else does, someone who's not afraid to spill water on my laptop if it means saving everything." "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance," Lillian corrected, "to be something other than invisible, to use what you know to protect instead of just watch." She held out her hand. "What do you say?" Ethan looked at her hand, looked at her face, looked at the conference room full of people working to save a company he didn't even work for. Then he reached out and shook. "Okay," he said, "but I still need to pick up Sophie at 3:30. Done. The sun was fully up now, painting the city in shades of gold and gray. Somewhere out there, Morrison was running. Hathaway was probably getting a very interesting phone call. And in conference room A on the 47th floor, two people who'd been strangers 5 hours ago were making a deal that might save them both, or destroy them. It could really go either way. But as Lillian watched Ethan turn back to help Marcus with some final security check, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dangerous thing, hope. But then again, so was trust. And somehow, between the spilled water and the stolen data and the early morning chaos, she'd found someone worth taking that risk for, even if he did have terrible timing with cleaning carts. The real work was just beginning. By 6 a.m., Lillian had consumed 3 cups of coffee that tasted like battery acid and made approximately 17 decisions that would either save her company or bury it completely. The background check on Ethan came back at 11:43. Henderson dropped the file on her desk with the kind of theatrical thump that suggested he'd hoped to find something damning and was disappointed. "He's clean," Henderson said, unable to hide his irritation. "Everything checks out. Former head of cybersecurity at Redline Technologies, exactly like he said. Stellar reputation until the breach. After that, he flipped through the pages. 2 years of unemployment. Custody battle with his ex-wife. Then he started working for building services companies under his real name. No aliases, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket." Lillian scanned the report. There was a photo of Ethan from his Redline days. Younger, clean-shaven, wearing a suit that probably cost more than he made in a month now. He looked like a different person, confident, successful, unbroken. "What about the daughter?" she asked. "Sophie Cole, age 6, lives with her mother during the week, stays with him on weekends. He's never missed a custody exchange. Teachers say he's involved, shows up to parent-teacher conferences, volunteers for field trips." Henderson's tone suggested this was somehow suspicious. "The guy's either exactly what he claims to be, or he's the most patient con artist I've ever seen." "Thank you, Henderson. That'll be all." When he left, Lillian sat back in her chair and stared at the photograph. She'd built her entire career on reading people, on knowing who to trust and who to keep at arm's length. But Ethan was harder to read than most. Maybe because he'd spent 5 years practicing how to disappear. Her intercom buzzed. "Ms. Drake, Mr. Cole is here for his appointment." Right. The appointment she'd scheduled for noon, after she'd had time to review the background check and decide whether to actually go through with this insane idea. "Send him in." Ethan looked different in daylight. Still tired, but he'd changed out of the janitor uniform into jeans and a button-down shirt that had seen better days. His hair was still too long, but he'd made an effort to comb it. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was supposed to be there. "Sit," Lillian said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. He sat, looked around her office, glass walls, minimalist furniture, a view that cost more than most people's yearly salary. She watched him take it all in without comment. "Your background check came back clean," she said. "I know." "How do you know?" "Because if it hadn't, Henderson would have arrested me instead of letting me leave this morning." Ethan folded his hands in his lap. "I'm guessing he's disappointed. He prefers simple problems with simple solutions. And I'm not simple." "No," Lillian agreed. "You're not." She pushed the file across the desk. "I read about what happened at Redline. The breach, the bankruptcy, all of it. The report said it was an inside job. Someone with admin access." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It was. They never caught who did it." "No." "Do you know who it was?" The silence stretched between them. Ethan stared at the file like it might bite him. "I had suspicions," he said finally, "but no proof. By the time I had enough to take to the CEO, the damage was done. The data was gone. The investors pulled out. The company folded." He looked up. "And the person I suspected? They'd already moved on to another company. Clean record, glowing recommendations." "From who?" "From me." His voice was flat. "I wrote them a recommendation letter 3 months before the breach. Because I trusted them. Because I thought I knew them." Lillian understood that particular knife twist. "Is that why you became a janitor? Because you couldn't trust yourself to make the right call?" "I became a janitor because no one in tech would hire me after Redline went under. I was the head of security when we got breached. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence." He leaned back in the chair. "But yeah, part of it was I needed to step back, figure out what I'd missed, why I didn't see it coming." "And did you figure it out?" "I figured out that most people don't look at janitors. They talk freely when I'm in the room, like I'm not there. They leave sensitive documents on their desks, open laptops unlocked, passwords written on sticky notes." He met her eyes. "I figured out that the best way to see everything is to be invisible." Lillian tapped her fingers on the desk. "Marcus wants to hire you as a security consultant. Full access to our systems, supervised for the first 3 months, reporting directly to him." But I don't want you reporting to Marcus." Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly. "No?" "I want you reporting to me." She pulled out a folder she'd prepared that morning, working on pure instinct and caffeine. "I'm creating a new position, Director of Internal Security. Your job is to find the holes before someone else does. To watch for the patterns that don't make sense. To be the person who spills water on the laptop before everything goes to hell. That's..." Ethan looked genuinely surprised. "That's a lot of responsibility for someone you met 12 hours ago." "It's a lot of responsibility for someone who saved my company 12 hours ago," Lillian corrected. "Look, I could hire a consultant from a big firm. Someone with credentials and a clean record, and absolutely no personal stake in whether we succeed or fail. Or I can hire someone who knows exactly what it feels like to watch everything burn and is willing to do whatever it takes to prevent it from happening again. Even if that someone has a daughter to pick up at 3:30? Especially if that someone has a daughter to pick up at 3:30. It means you're not going to run when things get difficult. You have something to stay for. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What happened to Morrison?" "Still in the wind, but Patricia's team traced his financial records. He's been receiving payments from Hathaway Enterprises for 18 months. Small amounts, spread out, easy to miss. We're building a case." "And the merger?" "Dead." I called the board this morning and told them exactly what happened. Half of them wanted to proceed anyway, claim it was an isolated incident. The other half wanted my resignation. She smiled without humor. I told them all they were welcome to find a new CEO if they thought they could do better. No one took me up on it. "What about Hathaway?" "Patricia filed an injunction an hour ago. Hathaway's lawyers are scrambling. They're claiming Morrison acted alone, that they had no knowledge of any data theft, which is interesting considering the files were sent directly to their servers." "You think they'll settle?" "I think they'll try to bury us in legal fees until we give up." Lillian stood, walked to the window. The city looked different in daylight, less forgiving. "But I didn't build this company by giving up when things got hard." She heard Ethan stand behind her. "Why are you really offering me this job?" Lillian turned. "What do you mean?" "You have money, resources. You could hire anyone. Why someone with a failed track record and a janitor's resume?" "Because everyone else is going to tell me what I want to hear," Lillian said. "They're going to write reports that say everything is fine, that we're secure, that it could never happen again. And I'll believe them because it's easier than admitting we're vulnerable." She crossed her arms. "But you? You'll tell me the truth, even if it's ugly, even if it means admitting you made a mistake, because you've already lost everything once, and you know what happens when people lie to make themselves look good." Ethan studied her face. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more," he gestured vaguely. "I don't know, corporate, polished, the kind of CEO who blames everyone else when things go wrong." "I spent 3 years waitressing to pay for business school," Lillian said. "I know what it's like to be invisible, to have people look through you like you don't matter. I swore if I ever made it, I wouldn't forget that." She paused. "Most days I keep that promise. Some days I don't. But I'm trying." The intercom buzzed again. "Ms. Drake, the police are here about Mr. Morrison." Lillian and Ethan exchanged glances. "Send them in." The detective who entered was a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen every variation of human stupidity. She introduced herself as Detective Sarah Martinez and got straight to business. "We found Morrison's car abandoned at a bus station in Delaware," Martinez said, pulling out a notebook. "Security footage shows him purchasing a ticket to New York under a false name, but we lost him after that. He's smart enough to know we'd be tracking his credit cards and phone." "So he could be anywhere," Lillian said. "Anywhere with a bus route, yeah." Martinez looked at Ethan. "You're the one who discovered the breach?" "I noticed the network pattern," Ethan said carefully. "Ms. Drake's IT director confirmed it." "And you're a janitor?" "I was a janitor as of—" He glanced at Lillian. "Well, as of about 5 minutes ago, apparently I'm the director of internal security." Martinez's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Convenient timing." "Detective," Lillian cut in, "Mr. Cole had nothing to do with the theft. He's the one who stopped it from getting worse." "So you say. But from where I'm sitting, it's interesting that a janitor with a background in cybersecurity just happened to be in the right place at the right time to play hero." Martinez turned to Ethan. "How long have you been working in this building?" 3 months? "And in those 3 months, how many times did you access the executive floor after hours?" "This was the first time." "Why?" "Because I'd been watching the network traffic from the maintenance systems, and I saw an anomaly that coincided with Ms. Drake's late-night work schedule. I thought something might be wrong." Martinez wrote something in her notebook. "And you just happened to spill water on her laptop at exactly the right moment to interrupt the data transfer." "It was an accident," Ethan said. His voice was level, but Lillian could see tension in his shoulders. "Was it? Because from a certain angle, this looks like an inside job. You work here. You have the technical knowledge. You could have set up the whole thing with Morrison and then played hero to throw off suspicion." "That's ridiculous," Lillian said. "Ethan had no motive, didn't he?" "According to my information, Mr. Cole has been struggling financially since the Red Line collapse. Custody battles aren't cheap. Maybe someone offered him a way to make some quick money. Maybe he got cold feet at the last second. Ethan stood up. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of something I didn't do. If you want to arrest me, detective, go ahead. Otherwise, I have a daughter to pick up in 3 hours. And I'd like to spend at least some of today not being interrogated. Sit down, Mr. Cole. No. Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. I spent 5 years being blamed for something I tried to prevent. I'm not doing it again. You want to investigate me? Fine. Pull my phone records, check my bank accounts, interview my neighbors. You won't find anything because there's nothing to find. But I'm done defending myself to people who've already made up their minds. He turned to Lillian. I appreciate the job offer, but I think it's pretty clear that working here is going to be more trouble than it's worth. For both of us. Ethan. I'm sorry. He headed for the door. Mr. Cole, Martinez called after him. Don't leave town. He didn't respond, just kept walking. When the door closed, Martinez turned to Lillian. You sure you want to tie your company to someone like that? Someone like what? Someone who's been proven innocent of any wrongdoing? Someone who actually tried to help? Lillian's voice was ice. Unless you have actual evidence of a crime, detective, I suggest you focus on finding Morrison instead of harassing the person who stopped him. Martinez snapped her notebook shut. I'm just doing my job, Ms. Drake. So am I. And part of my job is protecting the people who work for me. He doesn't work for you. He just quit. The detective left, and Lillian was alone in her office with the job offer contract sitting on her desk, unsigned. She grabbed her phone and called Marcus. I need Ethan Cole's personal number. Ms. Drake, I'm not sure that's... Now, Marcus. He texted it to her 30 seconds later. Lillian dialed before she could second-guess herself. Ethan answered on the third ring. Yeah? Where are you? Parking garage. Why? Don't leave. Silence on the other end. Then, did you hear what that detective said? She thinks I was part of it. She's a cop. She's supposed to suspect everyone. It's her job. And what's your job? Because from where I'm standing, hiring me is going to bring you nothing but problems. The board's already skeptical, Morrison's in the wind, and now you've got law enforcement thinking your new director of security is actually a criminal. I don't care what they think. You should. You're trying to save your company. The last thing you need is... What I need, Lillian interrupted, is someone I can trust. And in the past 24 hours, you've proven you're that person. So I'm asking you again, don't leave. She heard him exhale on the other end of the line. I have to pick up Sophie at 3:30. I know. We'll make it work. You don't even know me. I know you came back after spilling water on my laptop instead of running. I know you spent hours helping secure my network when you could have just disappeared. I know you have a daughter you're trying to protect and a past you're trying to make up for. Lillian paused. And I know what it's like to have everyone doubt you when you're trying to do the right thing. More silence. Then, if I do this, if I take this job, I'm not going to be invisible anymore. People are going to ask questions. Let them ask. And when they find out about Redline, about why I failed, then we'll deal with it, together. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. The parking garage ambiance in the background, distant car engines, the echo of footsteps. Okay, he said finally. I'll come back. But I want it in writing that I leave every day by 3 to pick up Sophie. Non-negotiable. Done. Anything else? Yeah. I want direct access to all network monitoring systems. No filters, no delays. If something's wrong, I need to see it in real time. Marcus will have a heart attack, but yes. And I want to know exactly what we're up against. Morrison, Hathaway, whoever else is involved. No secrets. Lillian looked at the files spread across her desk. Legal briefs, financial records, security logs. Come back upstairs. We have a lot to go through. He showed up 20 minutes later. Lillian had cleared off her conference table and spread out everything they had on Morrison's activities over the past 18 months. Bank statements showing regular deposits from shell companies traced back to Hathaway. Email records Marcus had recovered from the servers. Security footage showing Morrison staying late on nights when major data transfers occurred. Ethan studied it all in silence, occasionally picking up a document or leaning closer to examine a detail. This is meticulous, he said finally. Morrison wasn't improvising. He had a plan, and he stuck to it for over a year. Patricia thinks Hathaway recruited him specifically for this, offered him money to steal our R&D data so they could beat us to market with our own technology. It's possible, but look at the timing. Ethan pulled up Morrison's calendar on his phone, cross-referencing it with the data transfers. Every major theft coincides with a board meeting or investor presentation. He wasn't just stealing data, he was stealing strategy, plans, decisions before they were implemented. So Hathaway knew our moves before we made them. Exactly, which means the merger wasn't about acquisition. It was about control. They already had everything they needed to compete. The merger was just a way to make sure you couldn't fight back. Lillian felt sick. How long do you think this has been going on? The planning, I mean. Before Morrison even joined your company. Look. Ethan pulled up Morrison's employment records. He was hired 4 years ago. Within 6 months, he was promoted to CTO. Within a year, he had full admin access to everything. That's not normal career progression. You think someone recommended him? Set him up? I think someone very carefully placed him exactly where he needed to be. Ethan looked at her. Who hired Morrison? Lillian's blood went cold. I did. Who recommended him to you? She thought back 4 years. It felt like a lifetime ago. She'd been looking for a CTO, someone technical enough to handle the company's rapid growth, but business-minded enough to sit on the board. Morrison's resume had been perfect, his references glowing. The recommendation came from... She stopped. It came from Gerald Hathaway. He said Morrison had done consulting work for his company and was brilliant. Ethan nodded slowly. There it is. But that would mean Hathaway planned this from the beginning. 4 years of setting pieces in place, building trust, waiting for the right moment. Welcome to industrial espionage, Ethan said. It's not glamorous, it's patient. Lillian sat down heavily. If this goes back 4 years, then everything Morrison touched could be compromised. Every decision, every strategy, She looked up at Ethan. We need to do a complete audit. Every system, every file, every access point. Figure out exactly what they have and what they don't. That's going to take weeks, maybe months. Then we start now. They worked through lunch. Marcus joined them around 1 p.m., bringing his entire IT team and enough coffee to fuel a small army. By 2 p.m., they'd identified at least 30 major security vulnerabilities Morrison had either created or deliberately ignored. By 2:30, they'd found evidence of 3 other data breaches over the past 2 years that had been covered up or attributed to technical glitches. He was careful, Marcus said, staring at the evidence spread across the table. Every theft was small enough to miss, spaced out enough to seem random. If Ethan hadn't caught the pattern, we'd have signed the merger and handed everything over without knowing we'd been robbed, Lillian finished. At 3 p.m., Ethan stood up abruptly. I need to go. Sophie, Lillian remembered. Yeah. Her school's 20 minutes from here, and I can't be late. Her mother already thinks I'm unreliable. Go. We'll keep working. Ethan hesitated. You sure? I'm sure. We're going to be doing this for a while. Might as well get used to working around school pickup schedules. He grabbed his jacket, still the same worn one from that morning, and headed for the door. Then he paused. Thank you, he said, for believing me. When the detective... Don't, Lillian cut him off. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. He smiled, just barely, but it was there. Most people wouldn't call this basic decency. Most people are assholes. That surprised a real laugh out of him. Yeah, they are. When he left, Marcus moved closer to Lillian. You know the board's going to lose their minds when they find out you hired him. The board can file a complaint. I'm serious, Ms. Drake. Some of them already think you're too impulsive, too young. Hiring someone with Ethan's history. Ethan's history is exactly why I hired him, Lillian said. He knows what failure looks like. He's not going to let it happen again. Or he's going to bring his own problems with him. Then we'll deal with them. She turned back to the files. Right now, I trust him more than I trust half the people who've been working here for years. At least he's honest about his mistakes. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then he said, For what it's worth, I think you're right. About him. He knows things I've never seen anyone pick up on that fast. The way he spotted the breach pattern. He shook his head. I should have seen it. I've been staring at those same logs for months. You were looking for external threats. Morrison was internal. Different pattern. Still, I missed it. We all did, Lillian said. That's why we need someone who looks at things differently. They worked until 7 p.m. By then, Lillian's eyes were burning and her back ached from hours of standing over the conference table. Patricia had joined them around 5, bringing legal perspectives on what evidence they could use in court versus what was just professionally embarrassing. The good news, Patricia said, is that we have enough to prove Morrison was stealing data. The bad news is that tying it definitively to Hathaway is going to be harder. The shell companies, the indirect payments, it's all designed to provide plausible deniability. So what do? We make them nervous, file the injunction, leak some carefully worded statements to the press, let them know we're not going quietly. Maybe someone on their side gets scared and turns on them. And if they don't? Patricia's smile was sharp. Then we make them wish they had. Lillian's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Everything okay? Don't want to interrupt if you're in a meeting. She realized it was Ethan, checking in even though he'd left 4 hours ago, still working. You? Sophie's doing homework. Well, she's supposed to be doing homework. Mostly she's telling me about her friend's new hamster. Despite everything, Lillian smiled. Sounds important. Critical intel. Apparently the hamster's name is Princess Sparkles, and it eats too much. Keep me updated on the situation. Will do. Let me know if you need anything. I can work remotely after she goes to bed. Lillian looked at the piles of documents still waiting to be reviewed. I might take you up on that. She sent Marcus and his team home around 8. Patricia stayed until 9, then left with a stack of files to review overnight. Finally, Lillian was alone in her office with the city lights spread out below and the weight of 4 years of deception pressing down on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed again. Ethan. Sophie's asleep. What do you need? She called him instead of texting. He answered immediately. How are you holding up? He asked. I've had better days. Yeah, I figured. She heard the sound of a door closing, like he was moving to another room. What can I do? Talk me through something. These data transfers Morrison was making, could he have copies we don't know about? Backups hidden somewhere we haven't found yet? Possible. Probable even. If I was stealing data for 18 months, I'd have multiple backups in multiple locations. Insurance in case something went wrong. Lillian rubbed her temples. So even if we shut down what we found, there could be more out there. Most likely. But here's the thing. Backups are only useful if you can access them. And if Morrison's running, he's not accessing anything right now. He's trying to stay invisible. Like you were. Yeah, like I was. Ethan paused. The difference is, I wasn't running from the law. I was just trying to rebuild a life. Morrison's running from consequences. That makes people sloppy. You think he'll make a mistake? I think he already has. The transfer last night was too big, too obvious. He got greedy, and greedy people make more mistakes. Lillian looked at the Morrisons' financial records spread across her desk. Patricia thinks Hathaway will cut him loose, claim he was a rogue actor. They probably will. Question is whether Morrison planned for that. What do you mean? If I was Morrison and I was working for someone like Hathaway, I'd have insurance, something to make sure they couldn't just throw me under the bus when things got messy. Like what? Like evidence tying Hathaway directly to the theft, emails, recordings, payments that can't be explained away, something concrete enough that if they try to burn him, he can burn them back. Lillian sat up straighter. You think Morrison has evidence against Hathaway? I think if he's smart, and we know he is, he made sure he wasn't the only one at risk. Ethan's voice was thoughtful. The question is where he'd hide it. Not on company servers. We'd find it. Not at his house. Police would find it. Where then? Somewhere he could access remotely. Somewhere that doesn't trace back to him directly. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Does Morrison have family? People he might trust with something valuable? Lillian pulled up Morrison's employment file. Parents are deceased. No siblings listed. Divorced. No kids. Emergency contact is listed as... She stopped. Emily Warren. Relationship. Fiancé. Did you know he was engaged? No, he never mentioned it. Lillian was already typing, searching for Emily Warren. If she's his emergency contact, she's important, someone he trusts. Find her, Ethan said. Find her, and maybe we find Morrison's insurance policy. They spent the next 2 hours digging into Emily Warren's background. She was 38, worked as a freelance graphic designer, lived in an apartment in Brooklyn. Social media showed a quiet life. Art gallery visits, coffee shop photos, occasional travel. Nothing that screamed hiding evidence of corporate espionage. But then Ethan found something interesting. "Look at this," he said. Lillian had put him on speaker while they both searched. "Emily has a storage unit. Been paying for it for 3 years, climate-controlled, high security. Why would a graphic designer need that? Could be art supplies, equipment? Could be. Or it could be exactly what Morrison would need to hide backups where no one would think to look." Lillian called Martinez. The detective answered on the first ring, sounding irritated. "Ms. Drake, it's 11 p.m. "I know, I'm sorry, but I think we found something." She explained about Emily Warren and the storage unit. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "That's good work. I'll get a warrant and check it out tomorrow." "Tomorrow? Morrison could access it before then. I can't get a warrant at 11 p.m. without a judge, and I can't convince a judge without probable cause. Right now, all we have is speculation." Martinez's voice softened slightly. "I know you want this solved, but we have to do it right, or any evidence we find gets thrown out in court." Lillian wanted to argue, wanted to drive to Brooklyn herself and break into the storage unit if that's what it took. But she knew Martinez was right. "Fine. First thing tomorrow." "First thing," Martinez agreed. "And Ms. Drake, the work you and Mr. Cole did tonight, that's helpful. Just don't go investigating on your own. Leave the police work to the police." When she hung up, Ethan was laughing quietly on the other end. "What?" Lillian demanded. "She basically just told you not to do what we've been doing for the past 6 hours. We're not investigating. We're protecting company assets." "Right. That's definitely what we're doing." Despite herself, Lillian smiled. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be another long day." "So should you." "I will. Soon." "Lillian," his voice was gentle. "When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" The use of her first name surprised her. They'd been Ms. Drake and Mr. Cole all day, maintaining professional distance. This felt different, more real. "I don't know," she admitted. "Before the merger talks started, probably. That was months ago." "I'm fine. You're running on fumes and coffee. Trust me, I recognize the signs. I did the same thing after Redline collapsed. Thought if I just worked hard enough, I could fix everything." He paused. "It didn't work. I just burned out faster. What should I do then? Morrison's out there somewhere, Hathaway's plotting their next move, and my company is bleeding from holes I didn't even know existed. I can't just—" "You can rest for 6 hours so you're sharp enough to fight tomorrow," Ethan interrupted. "You're not going to save your company by destroying yourself." Lillian looked at her reflection in the dark window. She looked exhausted, older than 34, worn down in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. "Okay," she said quietly. 6 hours. "Good. I'll see you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Make it 8. "Lillian?" 8:30, final offer. She heard him smile through the phone. 8:30. Get some sleep." When she finally left the office at midnight, Henderson insisted on walking her to her car. The parking garage was empty except for their footsteps echoing off concrete. "You trust him?" Henderson asked as they walked. "Cole, I mean." "Yes." "Even though you barely know him?" "I know enough." Henderson was quiet until they reached her car. Then he said, "For what it's worth, I ran his background through every database I could access. Called in favors with cops in 3 states. The guy's clean. Whatever happened at Redline, he wasn't part of it." "I know. Just making sure you know." Lillian unlocked her car. "Henderson, thank you for checking, for caring." He shrugged. "It's my job to protect you, even when you're being stubborn about who you hire." She drove home through empty streets, her mind still racing despite her exhaustion. When she finally collapsed into bed at 1 a.m., she set her alarm for 7:30, giving herself 6.5 hours. She'd call it a victory. Her phone buzzed one last time. "Ethan, sleep. That's an order from your Director of Internal Security." She smiled in the darkness and texted back, "Yes, sir." Then she closed her eyes and let the exhaustion take her under. Tomorrow they'd keep fighting, but tonight, for the first time in months, she felt like maybe she wasn't fighting alone. Lillian's alarm went off at 7:30, pulling her out of a dream where she was drowning in filing cabinets. She woke up disoriented, her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. For a blissful second, she thought maybe the past 48 hours had been the dream instead. Then she saw the 17 missed calls and knew it was all real. Most were from Patricia, 2 from Marcus, 1 from a number she didn't recognize. She called Patricia back first while stumbling toward the coffee maker. "Turn on the news," Patricia said without preamble. "Good morning to you too." "Lillian, turn on the news. Channel 7. She grabbed the remote and flipped to Channel 7. A perfectly coiffed anchor was speaking over footage of her building, police cars visible in the parking lot. The headline scrolling across the bottom made her stomach drop. Tech CEO faces federal investigation into data breach. "What the hell?" "Someone leaked," Patricia said. "The story broke an hour ago. They're saying the FBI is investigating possible fraud and industrial espionage at your company. They've named Morrison, but also suggested there might be other suspects." "Other suspects?" "They didn't name names, but the implication is that you might have known about the breach and failed to report it." Lillian sank onto her couch, coffee forgotten. "That's insane. We reported it to the police immediately." "Reported a janitor spilling water on your laptop, yes. The story they're running says you've been aware of security issues for months and covered them up to protect the merger." "Who would—" Lillian stopped. The answer was obvious. Hathaway. "Almost certainly. They're trying to control the narrative before we can build our case. Make you look incompetent or complicit or both." "Can they do that?" "They just did." Patricia's voice was grim. "I'm already drafting a response, but Lillian, this is bad. The board is going to panic. Investors are going to pull out. And if the FBI actually opens an investigation, let them investigate. We have nothing to hide." "You hired a man with a history of failed cybersecurity less than 24 hours after he gained access to all your systems. From their perspective, that looks suspicious as hell." Lillian's phone buzzed with another call. "Ethan, I need to take this. I'll call you back." She switched lines. "Have you seen the news?" "I'm watching it now." Ethan's voice was tight. "They're going to come after me. You know that, right? Failed security chief from Redline suddenly shows up at your company right before a massive breach. You didn't cause the breach. You stopped it." "I know that, you know that, but to everyone else?" He exhaled sharply. "I should resign before this gets worse for you." "No." "Lillian." "No," she repeated. "We don't run. We fight back. Together." Silence on his end. Then, "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Why not both?" She was already moving, grabbing clothes from her closet with one hand while balancing the phone with the other. "Meet me at the office in 30 minutes. We need to figure out who leaked this story and why." "I can't. Sophie's still asleep and her mother doesn't pick her up until 9. "Bring her." "What?" "Bring Sophie to the office. We have a break room with terrible cable and probably some ancient coloring books in a drawer somewhere. She can hang out there until her mother comes." "Lillian, I can't bring my 6-year-old daughter to—" "Yes, you can. Because the alternative is you staying home while I deal with this mess alone, and I'm not doing that." Her voice softened. "Please, I need you here." Another pause. "Okay, but if this goes badly—" "It's already gone badly. Now we're just trying to limit the damage." She made it to the office in 23 minutes, breaking at least 4 traffic laws in the process. The lobby was swarming with reporters, cameras, people shouting questions at anyone who tried to enter. Henderson and his team had formed a perimeter, but it was like trying to hold back the ocean with a beach umbrella. "Miss Drake!" A reporter shoved a microphone toward her. "Is it true the FBI is investigating your company?" "Ms. Drake, did you know about the data breach before the merger talks?" "Is it true you hired a failed security consultant to cover up your own negligence?" Lillian kept her head down and pushed through. Henderson appeared at her elbow, using his bulk to clear a path. "This is insane," he muttered. "We've never had this kind of attention before." "Welcome to my nightmare," Lillian said. The elevator ride up felt like it took an hour. When the doors opened on the executive floor, she found chaos. Phones ringing nonstop. Staff huddled in small groups, speaking in urgent whispers. Marcus pacing outside her office, his face gray. "They're calling for an emergency board meeting," he said before she could even ask. 10 a.m. They want answers. "They'll get answers, just not the ones they're expecting." Ethan arrived 15 minutes later with Sophie in tow. The little girl had dark hair like her father's and serious brown eyes that took in everything. She wore a purple backpack decorated with stars and carried a stuffed rabbit that looked well-loved. "This is Sophie," Ethan said unnecessarily. "Sophie, this is Ms. Drake. She's—" He hesitated. "I'm your dad's boss," Lillian said, crouching down to Sophie's level. "It's nice to meet you." Sophie studied her with the kind of intense scrutiny only a 6-year-old could manage. "You're pretty." "Thank you. So are you." "Daddy says you're in trouble." Lillian glanced up at Ethan, who looked mortified. "Sophie, he didn't say what kind of trouble," Sophie continued seriously, "but he was worried. He only makes coffee at 5 in the morning when he's worried." "I see." Lillian stood back up. "Well, your daddy is helping me fix the trouble. That's why we need to work today." Sophie considered this. "Okay, do you have crayons?" "I'm sure we can find some." Marcus appeared looking harried. "Ms. Drake, the board is waiting in conference room A. They want to start early." "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." She turned to Ethan. "Get Sophie settled, then meet me in there. I want you at this meeting." "Are you sure? If they see me, they need to see you. They need to know you're not hiding." She looked at Marcus. "Can you help Ethan find the break room? Make sure Sophie has everything she needs?" Marcus looked between Ethan and Sophie, clearly uncomfortable with children invading his professional space. But he nodded. "Yeah, sure." Lillian watched them head down the hallway. Marcus walking stiffly, Sophie chattering about a rabbit, Ethan quiet and tense. Then she straightened her jacket and walked into the conference room. The board was already assembled, 12 faces ranging from concerned to furious. Gerald Hathaway sat at the far end, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "Lillian," said James Chen, the board chairman, "thank you for joining us. I wasn't aware I had a choice." "You always have a choice. Right now you can choose to explain what the hell is happening to this company, or you can choose to step down and let someone else clean up this disaster." Lillian took her seat at the head of the table. "I'm not stepping down." "Then start explaining. The news is reporting an FBI investigation." "There is no FBI investigation. Not yet, anyway. Someone leaked false information to damage our credibility and tank our stock price." She looked directly at Hathaway. "I wonder who would benefit from that." Hathaway's expression didn't change. "Are you accusing me of something, Ms. Drake?" "I'm stating facts. You attempted to acquire this company through a merger. When we discovered your CTO was stealing our data, we canceled the deal. Now suddenly the media is reporting we're under federal investigation. The timing is interesting." "The timing," Hathaway said smoothly, "suggests you're looking for a scapegoat. Your own CTO was caught stealing company secrets. That's on you, not me. Morrison was recommended by you 4 years ago. You vouched for him personally. I recommended dozens of people over the years. I can't be held responsible if one of them turns out to be a criminal." "Can't you?" Lillian pulled out the files she'd prepared that morning. "Because our investigation shows Morrison has been receiving payments from shell companies tied to Hathaway Enterprises for the past 18 months. Payments that coincide exactly with major data transfers from our servers to yours." The room went very quiet. James leaned forward. "You have proof of this?" "We're building the case, but yes, we have transaction records, server logs, and communication intercepts that tie Morrison directly to Hathaway's companies." "That's circumstantial at best," Hathaway said. "Shell companies are notoriously hard to trace. Unless you have someone who knows exactly what patterns to look for." Lillian stood. "Which brings me to our new director of internal security." She opened the conference room door. Ethan stood there, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. But he walked in, meeting the eyes of every board member in turn. "This is Ethan Cole," Lillian said. "Some of you may recognize the name from the Redline Technologies breach 5 years ago. Mr. Cole was the head of security when that company was destroyed by industrial espionage. He knows exactly how these operations work because he's lived through one. And he's the person who discovered Morrison's theft before it could destroy us the same way." "You hired him." James looked between Lillian and Ethan. "The man from Redline." "I hired the man who saved this company. Without him, we'd have signed the merger tomorrow and handed everything over to Hathaway without knowing we'd been compromised." "Or," Hathaway cut in, "he's part of the scheme. Did you consider that? A man with a history of security failures suddenly appears at exactly the right moment to play hero? It's convenient. It would be, Ethan said quietly, if I had anything to gain, but I don't. I'm a single father working to support my daughter and trying to make up for past mistakes. I noticed the breach pattern because I've seen it before, because I failed to stop it once, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. How touching, Hathaway's voice dripped sarcasm. But forgive me if I'm skeptical of your sudden moral awakening. Skeptical all you want. The evidence speaks for itself. Ethan pulled out his tablet, the one Marcus had given him access to. These are the server logs from the night of the breach. You can see exactly when the data transfer started, exactly where it went, and exactly whose credentials were used to receive it. Would you like me to walk you through it? That won't be necessary, James said. He looked tired, older than his 63 years. Lillian, even if everything you're saying is true, the optics of this are terrible. You hired someone with a controversial history in the middle of a crisis. The media is going to crucify us. The media is already crucifying us, Lillian shot back, because Hathaway leaked a false story to control the narrative. We can either hide and let them define us, or we can fight back with the truth. And what truth is that? That we were so incompetent we didn't notice our own CTO stealing from us for 18 months? That we were targeted by a sophisticated operation designed specifically to exploit our trust? That we discovered it before catastrophic damage occurred? And that we're taking aggressive action to make sure it never happens again? She looked around the table. I know I'm young. I know some of you think I was promoted too fast, that I don't have enough experience to handle a crisis like this. Maybe you're right. But I built this company from nothing. I'm not going to let it die because some corporate raiders decided we were an easy target. The silence stretched. Then Sarah Kim, one of the younger board members, spoke up. What's your plan, specifically? Lillian glanced at Ethan. He nodded slightly, and she continued. We've traced Morrison's data to a storage unit rented by his fiancée. Police are executing a search warrant this morning. If we're right, we'll find backups of everything he stole, plus evidence tying Hathaway directly to the theft. We use that to file criminal charges and a civil suit for damages. And if you're wrong, Sarah asked, then we keep digging until we find it, because it's out there. Morrison was too careful to not have insurance. James rubbed his temples. This is going to cost millions in legal fees. Our stock is already down 30% from yesterday. Investors are fleeing. Let them flee. The ones who stay will be stronger for it. Lillian sat back down. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you what's happening. You can support it, or you can try to remove me. But either way, I'm fighting. Hathaway stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to these baseless accusations. James, I suggest you consider whether Ms. Drake's paranoia is serving the company's best interests. Sit down, Gerald, James said wearily. Excuse me? I said sit down, because I'm starting to wonder if Lillian's paranoia might actually be justified. James pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. I did some digging this morning. Nothing as sophisticated as Mr. Cole's work, I'm sure. But I found it interesting that you recommended Morrison 4 years ago, right around the same time you started acquiring competitors in our market, and that every company you acquired had recently experienced security breaches or data theft. Hathaway's expression finally cracked. Just for a second, but everyone saw it. Those were coincidences, market conditions, were remarkably convenient for you, James finished. I'm not saying Lillian's right, but I'm not saying she's wrong either. And until we know for sure, I think it's best if you recuse yourself from any decisions regarding this investigation. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You're either a victim of Morrison's deception, in which case you should want to help us find the truth, or you're complicit, in which case you have no business being in this room. James looked at the rest of the board. All in favor of Gerald's temporary recusal? 9 hands went up. Only 2 stayed down. Hathaway's face went red. This is ridiculous. You're letting a child and a failed security consultant destroy everything we've built? We built this company, Lillian said quietly. You just tried to steal it. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he grabbed his briefcase and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. When he was gone, James exhaled slowly. Well, that was dramatic. Do you really think he's involved? Sarah asked. I think Lillian's given us enough reason to investigate further. And I think we owe it to ourselves and our shareholders to find out the truth. He looked at Lillian. You have 2 weeks. Find me concrete evidence, or we're going to have to consider other options. What kind of options? The kind where we bring in an outside firm to handle the investigation, where we put you on temporary leave until this is resolved, where we protect the company even if it means sacrificing you. His voice wasn't unkind, just realistic. I'm on your side, Lillian, but I have a responsibility to everyone here. Don't make me choose between you and the company. I won't, Lillian said. 2 weeks. We'll have everything you need. The meeting broke up slowly. Board members filed out, some offering supportive looks, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Ethan stayed seated until the room was empty except for the two of them and James, who was gathering his papers. Mr. Cole, James said without looking up, I hope you know what you're getting into. I do, sir. Good. Because if you're wrong about any of this, it won't just be Lillian who goes down. It'll be you too. James finally looked at him. Redline was 5 years ago. This is your second chance. Don't waste it. I don't intend to. When James left, Lillian slumped in her chair. That went better than expected. Better? Ethan looked at her like she was crazy. He basically just gave us an ultimatum. He gave us 2 weeks and his tentative support. That's more than I had yesterday. She pulled out her phone. Martinez should be at the storage unit by now. Let's see if we got lucky. The detective answered on the second ring. We're in. You were right. This place is packed with hard drives and backup tapes. Looks like Morrison was planning for every contingency. Can you access the files? Not without a tech team. These are all encrypted, high-level stuff. We're going to need... Martinez paused. Actually, we're going to need someone like Mr. Cole, someone who can crack this without destroying the evidence. Lillian looked at Ethan. Can you do that? Maybe. Depends on the encryption, but I can try. Detective, we're on our way. Don't let anyone touch those drives until we get there. The drive to Brooklyn took 45 minutes through mid-morning traffic. Sophie was with them, secured in a booster seat that Ethan kept in his trunk for emergencies. She'd taken the sudden field trip in stride, munching on goldfish crackers and asking periodic questions about where they were going. We're helping the police, Ethan explained for the third time. Are you a policeman now? No, sweetheart. I'm helping them with computer stuff. Daddy's really good with computers, Sophie informed Lillian seriously. He fixed my tablet when I accidentally deleted all my games. Accidentally, Ethan muttered. You were trying to download a game about unicorns that was definitely malware. But the unicorns were so pretty. Lillian found herself smiling despite everything. There was something grounding about Sophie's presence, her complete obliviousness to the corporate warfare happening around her. To her, this was just another day with her dad, who fixed computers and sometimes drove to Brooklyn for reasons she didn't need to fully understand. The storage facility was industrial and anonymous, the kind of place people stored things they wanted forgotten. Martinez met them in the parking lot, looking both triumphant and worried. We've got 6 external hard drives, 4 backup tapes, and a laptop that looks like it hasn't been touched in months. All of it locked down tight. Ethan examined the equipment, handling each piece carefully. This is professional-grade security. Morrison knew what he was doing. Can you break it? Given enough time, yeah. But time is what we don't have. He looked at the laptop. If I can get into this, I might be able to find his encryption keys, but it's going to take some serious work. How long? Best case, 4 hours. Worst case? He shrugged. Could be days. We don't have days, Lillian said. I know. Ethan sat down right there on the concrete floor of the storage unit, laptop balanced on his knees. Sophie immediately plopped down next to him, pulling out a coloring book from her backpack. What are you doing, Daddy? Trying to solve a puzzle. I'm good at puzzles. I know you are, sweetie, but this is a grown-up puzzle. Sophie considered this, then went back to her coloring. Martinez watched them with an expression Lillian couldn't quite read. He really brought his kid to a crime scene, the detective said quietly. I didn't give him much choice. You trust him that much? Lillian watched Ethan's fingers fly across the keyboard, his face set in concentration while his daughter colored a picture of a castle next to him. Yeah, I do. 2 hours later, Ethan hit something. His entire posture changed. Got it. Partial access anyway. He pulled up a directory full of folders with cryptic names. These are all Morrison's personal files, encrypted, but I found a back door he probably didn't even know was there. What's in them? Martinez leaned over his shoulder. Give me a second. Ethan started opening files, financial records, email correspondence, meeting notes. And then, buried in a folder labeled insurance, holy hell, Ethan breathed. Lillian moved closer. On the screen was an email chain between Morrison and someone named Gerald. The emails were explicit. Instructions on what data to steal, when to transfer it, how to cover tracks, promises of payment, threats if Morrison didn't follow through. Martinez was already on her phone. That's enough for an arrest warrant. If we can prove that Gerald is Hathaway, we can. Ethan pulled up another file. Morrison kept copies of the wire transfers. They all originate from accounts tied to Hathaway personally, not his company. Him. Lillian felt something tight in her chest loosen. We have him. We have evidence, Martinez corrected. Now we need to move fast before he realizes what we found and tries to run. The next 3 hours were a blur. Martinez coordinating with her captain, federal prosecutors getting involved because the case crossed state lines, warrants being drafted and executed. And through it all, Ethan methodically copying files, building a case that was airtight enough to survive any legal challenge Hathaway's expensive lawyers could throw at it. Sophie fell asleep around 2 p.m., curled up on Lillian's jacket in the corner of the storage unit. Lillian found herself watching the little girl sleep while chaos erupted around them. She's out cold, Ethan said, appearing next to her. She always crashes after lunch. Usually on my couch, not in a storage unit, but she's adaptable. She's wonderful. Yeah, she is. Ethan's voice was soft. I'm sorry about all this. You shouldn't have to deal with my childcare issues on top of everything else. I don't mind. Honestly, having her here has been... Lillian searched for the word. Grounding. A reminder that there's more to life than corporate espionage and board meetings. That's a depressing bar for meaningful existence. And yet here we are. Ethan smiled. A real smile this time. Not the careful half version she'd seen before. Yeah, here we are. Martinez appeared in the doorway. We got him. Hathaway was at his office. Agents picked him up 10 minutes ago. Lillian felt her knees go weak. It's over? This part is. Now comes the legal circus. Martinez looked exhausted. But Ms. Drake, Mr. Cole, you did good work today, really good work. We had help, Ethan said, gesturing at all the evidence spread around them. You had each other, Martinez corrected. And honestly, that made all the difference. They drove back to Manhattan as the sun started setting, painting the city in shades of orange and gold. Sophie woke up cranky and hungry, demanding chicken nuggets with the kind of 6-year-old authority that brooked no argument. They stopped at a drive-thru, and Lillian found herself eating fast food in her car with a man she'd known for less than 3 days, and his daughter, who was explaining in great detail why her friend Emma's hamster was superior to her friend Tyler's hamster. Princess Sparkles has better fur, Sophie said seriously around a mouthful of nuggets. Tyler's hamster is kind of scraggly. Scraggly is a strong word, Ethan said, but accurate. Lillian's phone rang. Patricia. She answered on speaker. It's all over the news. FBI arrested Gerald Hathaway on charges of corporate espionage, fraud, and about 6 other things I can't pronounce. The stock's already rebounding. That's good. Good? Lillian, this is incredible. We're going to own the news cycle. I'm already drafting a statement positioning you as the CEO who refused to back down. Patricia. What? Can it wait until tomorrow? I'm eating chicken nuggets with my director of security and his daughter, and I'd really like to just... She paused. I'd like to not think about optics for 5 minutes. Silence on the other end. Then, yeah, okay, tomorrow. When she hung up, Ethan was looking at her with something like respect. You're full of surprises, he said. So are you. Good ones, mostly. Mostly? Your timing with water buckets could use work. He laughed, and Sophie looked up. What's funny? Your dad saved my company by being clumsy, Lillian said. Sophie considered this. Daddy's not usually clumsy. He's very careful. I was that night, Ethan admitted, right up until I wasn't. They finished their food in comfortable silence. Then Ethan drove Sophie home to her mother's place. and Lillian headed back to the office to face whatever came next. The building was quieter now. Most of the reporters had dispersed, chasing the bigger story of Hathaway's arrest. Henderson was still at his post, looking more relaxed than he had in days. "Hell of a day, Ms. Drake." "You could say that. For what it's worth, I was wrong about Cole. He's solid." "I know." She rode the elevator up alone, her reflection staring back at her in the polished doors. She looked different somehow. Still tired, still stressed, but less brittle. Less like she was holding everything together through sheer force of will. Her office felt too quiet after the chaos of the day. She stood at the window, looking out at the city lights, and let herself feel it. The relief, the exhaustion, the strange sense of having survived something that could have destroyed everything. Her phone buzzed. "Ethan." "Sophie's with her mom. You okay?" Lillian smiled. "Yeah. You?" "Tired. But good. Today was—" He didn't finish the thought, but she understood anyway. Today was the kind of day that changed things, that took two strangers and made them something else. Not quite friends, not quite colleagues. Something in between. "Get some rest," she typed. "Tomorrow we start rebuilding. Looking forward to it." She stayed at the window for a long time after that, watching the city breathe below her. Somewhere out there, Morrison was still running. Hathaway was in federal custody, and her company was bruised but standing. And for the first time in months, Lillian Drake felt like maybe, just maybe, she could trust someone other than herself to help carry the weight. Even if he did have terrible timing with cleaning carts. The rebuilding started on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after Hathaway's arrest, when the server room on the 32nd floor caught fire at 2 in the morning. Lillian got the call from building security while she was still awake, sitting at her kitchen table reviewing the restructuring plans she'd been working on for days. Henderson's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "We have a situation. Fire department's on the way, but Ms. Drake, it's the backup servers. The ones Morrison flagged as vulnerable." Her blood went cold. "How bad?" "Bad enough that we've activated emergency protocols, but the primary backup system, the one with the clean data we recovered from the storage unit, it's on the same floor. If the fire spreads, I'm on my way." She called Ethan while grabbing her keys. He answered on the first ring, voice alert despite the hour. "I heard. Already heading there." "Sophie is with her mother this week. I'm 10 minutes out." Lillian made it to the building in 8. Fire trucks were already there, red lights painting the facade in urgent strokes. Smoke billowed from shattered windows on the 32nd floor. Firefighters were suiting up, coordinating through radios, moving with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from running toward danger while everyone else ran away. She found Henderson at the command post they'd set up in the lobby. Marcus was there too, looking like he might throw up. "The fire started in the old backup server room," Marcus said, words tumbling over each other. "The one Morrison had access to. The sprinkler system didn't activate. Someone disabled it weeks ago, and we didn't catch it during the security sweep." "Someone," Lillian repeated. "Or Morrison." "Morrison," Marcus confirmed miserably. "Had to be. He's the only one who would have known which systems to target for maximum damage." "Where's the primary backup?" "Server room B, same floor, different section, but—" Marcus gestured helplessly at the smoke. "If the fire reaches it before they get it contained, we lose everything," Lillian finished. "All the recovered data, the evidence against Hathaway, the research and development files that hadn't been compromised, everything they'd fought to save." Ethan arrived moments later, still wearing sweatpants and a jacket thrown over a t-shirt. He took one look at the building and started toward the entrance. "Whoa, hold on." A firefighter stepped in his path. "Nobody goes in until we clear it. That server room has data we can't replace. If I can get to it, you'll die of smoke inhalation before you make it past the 20th floor." The firefighter was firm. "I understand it's important, but we have protocols. How long until you clear the floor?" "Could be 30 minutes, could be 2 hours. Depends on what we find up there." Ethan turned to Lillian. "We might not have 2 hours." She knew. The fire marshal was already talking about structural integrity, about heat damage to the floors above and below. Every minute that passed was another minute of irreplaceable data potentially burning. "There has to be another way," she said. Marcus pulled out his tablet with shaking hands. "The servers are designed to withstand high temperatures for a limited time. We might have—" He did some quick calculations. Maybe 45 minutes before the heat causes catastrophic damage, even if the fire doesn't reach them directly. Can we access them remotely? Copy the data off-site. Not with the network down. The fire took out the main connections on that floor. Lillian looked at the building, at the smoke, at the firefighters preparing to go in. An idea formed, dangerous and probably stupid. What about the exterior maintenance access? She asked Henderson. The platforms the window washers use. Henderson's eyes widened. You can't be serious. The server room has windows. If we could get to them from the outside. Ms. Drake, those platforms aren't designed for what? Moving equipment? They hold people in gear all the time. In normal conditions, yes. Not during a fire. But Ethan was already nodding slowly. It could work. If we could get onto the platform, reach the windows, break through, the servers are on wheeled racks. We could potentially move them to the windows, lower them down. That's insane, Marcus said. Completely insane. You have a better idea? Nobody did. The fire marshal took some convincing. Actually, it took Lillian signing a waiver accepting all liability, plus Patricia showing up and threatening legal action if they didn't at least let them try. By the time they got approval, 20 minutes had burned away. The maintenance platform was accessed from the roof. Lillian, Ethan, and 2 firefighters rode the service elevator up in tense silence. The firefighters had insisted on coming, had insisted on safety harnesses and hard hats and about a dozen other precautions that Lillian barely registered. The roof was chaos. Emergency lights, radio chatter, more smoke than she'd expected. The platform hung off the side of the building like a metal cage suspended in nothing. This is a terrible idea, one of the firefighters said while checking Ethan's harness. For the record. Noted, Ethan said. Lillian stepped onto the platform, and it swayed slightly under her weight. Her stomach dropped. She wasn't afraid of heights exactly, but she'd never been 47 stories up on a piece of metal held by cables either. Try not to look down, the firefighter advised. Too late. Lillian looked down and immediately regretted it. The street below was a distant strip of red and blue lights, people the size of ants. The wind up here was stronger than she'd expected, pulling at her hair and clothes. Ethan stepped on next to her, steadier than she felt. You okay? Ask me when we're back on solid ground. The firefighters operated the controls, lowering them slowly. The platform creaked and swayed, and Lillian grabbed the railing so hard her knuckles went white. Smoke billowed past them, acrid and choking. She could feel the heat now, radiating through the building's skin. There, Ethan pointed. Through the smoke, she could see the windows of server room B, still intact, still holding. They descended level with the windows. Inside, she could see the server racks through the glass, rows of blinking lights, equipment that held everything they'd fought to protect. The heat was intense this close, making the air shimmer. One of the firefighters pulled out a specialized tool and smashed the window. Glass rained inward, smoke poured out, and Lillian turned her face away, coughing. We need to move fast, the firefighter said. This platform isn't rated for this kind of heat exposure. Ethan climbed through the window first, disappearing into the smoke. Lillian followed, her feet finding purchase on the interior window ledge. The server room was an oven, heat radiating from the walls. Emergency lighting cast everything in red. Here. Ethan was already at the nearest server rack, unlocking the wheels. Help me move this. They pushed together. The rack rolled smoothly across the raised floor, years of careful engineering making it almost effortless despite its weight. At the window, the firefighters were waiting with straps and cables. This is going to be heavy, one said. Real heavy. Can the platform handle it? Let's find out. They rigged the first server rack with practiced efficiency, then used the platform's winch system to lower it. Lillian watched it descend into the smoke, praying the cables would hold. One down, Ethan said. How many more? 4 critical racks, Lillian said. The rest we can lose. They worked in a kind of desperate rhythm. Roll the rack to the window, rig it, lower it, repeat. The heat kept building. Sweat poured down Lillian's face, stinging her eyes. Her lungs burned from the smoke despite the mask one of the firefighters had given her. On the 3rd rack, Ethan stumbled. His foot caught on something and he went down hard, catching himself on his hands. I'm fine, he said before Lillian could ask. But when he stood, she saw blood seeping through his pants at the knee. You're hurt. It's nothing. Keep moving. They got the third rack to the window, the fourth. By now, Lillian's arms were shaking with exhaustion, her throat raw from breathing heated air. The firefighters were getting nervous, talking urgently into their radios. "We need to go," one said. "Right now. The structure's compromised." "One more," Lillian gasped. "Just one more." The final rack was the heaviest, loaded with the backup drives that contained everything from the storage unit. Morrison's evidence, Hathaway's emails, the proof they needed. Ethan and Lillian pushed together, muscles screaming. The rack moved inch by inch toward the window. Behind them, Lillian heard a sound like thunder, something collapsing in another part of the floor. "Go, go, go!" the firefighter was shouting now. They got the rack to the window. The firefighters grabbed it, started rigging it with shaking hands. Ethan climbed out onto the platform first, then turned back to help Lillian. She was halfway through the window when she heard it, a crack like a gunshot. The floor beneath the server room shifted, tilted. Equipment that hadn't been secured started sliding toward the far wall. "Lillian!" Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling hard. She tumbled onto the platform just as the floor inside gave way completely. The sound was deafening, metal shrieking, concrete shattering. Through the window, she watched the server room collapse into the floor below, everything they hadn't saved disappearing into smoke and ruin. "Up!" The firefighter hit the controls. The platform lurched upward, cables screaming with the weight of the server rack still attached. Lillian's harness caught her as the platform swayed violently. For one terrible second, she thought the whole thing would break free, send them all plummeting into the street below. But the cables held. The platform held. They made it to the roof in a controlled emergency ascent that felt like it took hours but probably lasted less than 2 minutes. When Lillian's feet touched solid concrete, her legs gave out. She sat down hard, coughing, shaking, alive. Ethan collapsed next to her. His knee was bleeding worse now, his face black with soot. He looked at her and started laughing, the kind of slightly hysterical laughter that came from surviving something that should have killed them. "We did it," he said. "We're insane." That too. The firefighters were already checking them over, talking about smoke inhalation and possible injuries. Someone pressed an oxygen mask into Lillian's hands. She breathed deep, the clean air shocking after the heat and smoke. Below, crews were lowering the server racks safely to the ground, all 5 of them. Everything critical, saved. "Ms. Drake," Henderson appeared, looking pale. "The fire's contained, mostly. The 32nd floor is a total loss, but they stopped it from spreading. Casualties? None. Building was empty except for security. Everyone's accounted for. Thank something for that, at least." Ethan was being examined by a paramedic, his torn pants revealing a gash that would probably need stitches. He caught Lillian's eye across the roof and smiled, exhausted but real. "You're both going to the hospital," the fire marshal said. It wasn't a suggestion. "I'm fine," Lillian started. "You just spent 20 minutes in a burning building and then dangled off the side of a skyscraper. You're going to the hospital, and I'm not arguing about it." The ambulance ride was surreal. Lillian sat on the gurney while a young EMT checked her vitals and asked questions she barely heard. Through the rear window, she could see Ethan in the second ambulance, his knee being bandaged. Her phone rang. "Patricia. Please tell me you're not dead." "Not dead. Going to the hospital for observation." "I'm going to kill you myself for pulling that stunt. Do you have any idea?" Patricia's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea how terrified I was watching that on the news? They had helicopter footage, Lillian, footage of you on that platform. The servers are safe, that's what matters. You matter. You stubborn—" Patricia exhaled sharply. "I'm meeting you at the hospital. Don't argue." She hung up before Lillian could respond. The emergency room was the special kind of chaos that came from it being 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Lillian got checked in, examined, declared miraculously healthy despite a recent attempt to die in a fire. They gave her oxygen and fluids and told her to rest, which she ignored in favor of finding Ethan. He was in the next bay over, getting his knee stitched up. 14 stitches, the nurse said cheerfully, like that was no big deal. Ethan sat very still, his face carefully blank. "You okay?" Lillian asked from the doorway. "Been better. You?" "Same." When the nurse finished and left them alone, Ethan looked at her properly. "That was stupid. What we did. Completely." We could have died. I know. So why do I feel like I'd do it again? Lillian sat down in the chair next to his bed. Because it mattered. Because walking away and letting it all burn, that would have been worse than the risk. That's not exactly logical. Since when has any of this been logical? Ethan smiled despite himself. Fair point. Patricia arrived like a force of nature, hugging Lillian so hard she couldn't breathe, then immediately yelling at her for being reckless and stupid and brave and terrifying. Marcus showed up 20 minutes later with updates. The servers were intact, the data was safe, IT was already setting up temporary systems in a different building. Morrison planned this, Marcus said quietly. Had to. The disabled sprinklers, the targeting of those specific systems, it was a dead man's switch. One last way to hurt us, even while he's running. Did it work? Lillian asked. We lost a lot. But not everything. Thanks to... He gestured helplessly at Lillian and Ethan. Thanks to whatever insanity you two pulled off tonight. They were released from the hospital around 6 a.m., both with strict instructions to rest and follow up with their regular doctors. Lillian's car was still at the office, so Ethan drove her there through the early morning streets. You should go home, she said when he pulled into the parking garage. Sleep. I need to pick up Sophie at 3:30. Ethan, you have 14 stitches in your knee and probably smoke damage to your lungs. Sleep first. Pick up Sophie later. Her mother will kill me if I'm late again. I'll call her, explain the situation. He looked at her sidelong. You're going to call my ex-wife and explain that I was late because I was busy rescuing servers from a burning building? When you put it that way, it does sound ridiculous. Everything about the past 3 weeks has been ridiculous. They sat in the parking garage, engine idling, neither of them moving to get out. The building loomed above them, smoke-stained and wounded but still standing. Morrison's still out there, Lillian said finally. He's going to try again. Probably. We need to find him before he does more damage. Yeah. Ethan rubbed his face. Martinez has every agency looking. FBI, state police, Interpol. He can't run forever. He's made it 3 weeks. 3 weeks isn't forever. Lillian wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that Morrison would slip up, get caught, face consequences. But part of her wondered if he was smart enough to disappear completely, to vanish into whatever life he'd built as a backup plan. Go home, she said again. I'll handle Sophie's pickup if you're not up for it. You don't even know Sophie. I know she likes castles and has opinions about hamsters. I'll manage. Ethan smiled despite his obvious exhaustion. You're really not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone harder, colder. The kind of CEO who sees people as assets instead of humans. I spent 3 years waitressing, Lillian said. You don't forget what it's like to be treated as less than human. I swore I wouldn't become that person. Did you keep that promise? She thought about the past 3 weeks. The board meetings where she'd been ruthless. The decisions she'd made that cost people their jobs. The times she'd put the company ahead of everything else because that's what survival required. Mostly, she said. Not always, but I'm trying. That's better than most people manage. They finally got out of the car. Ethan limped slightly on his injured knee, trying to hide it and failing. Lillian walked him to his car, made him promise to actually rest, then watched him drive away into the growing light. The office was empty this early. Lillian rode the elevator to her floor, walked through the quiet hallways, and stood at her window watching the sunrise paint the city gold. Somewhere out there, Morrison was running. Hathaway was in federal custody awaiting trial, and her company was still standing, scarred but surviving. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You got lucky. Next time you won't be. Her blood went cold. She called Henderson immediately. I just got a text. I think it's from Morrison. Forward it to me. Right now. She did. Henderson called back 2 minutes later. We're tracing it. But Ms. Drake, this changes things. He's making direct threats now. We need to increase your security detail. I don't need... You nearly died in a fire he probably planned. You're getting security whether you like it or not. Lillian wanted to argue. Wanted to say she could take care of herself. But the truth was, she was tired of fighting alone. Tired of pretending she didn't need help. Okay, she said. Whatever you think is necessary. The next few days blurred together. More security, more meetings with law enforcement, more press coverage as the story of the fire broke and people started asking how a CEO and her security director had ended up dangling off a building at 2 in the morning. Patricia handled most of the media, crafting a narrative about decisive leadership and heroic efforts to protect company assets. The board was less impressed, calling another emergency meeting to discuss whether Lillian's reckless behavior represented a liability. "You violated every safety protocol we have," James said, though his voice lacked real heat. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't, and we saved the data. This time. What about next time? What happens when Morrison tries again and you decide to play hero?" "Then I deal with it," Lillian said simply. "That's what you pay me for." Sarah Kim leaned forward. "I think what James is trying to say, perhaps poorly, is that we're concerned. Not about your competence, but about your judgment. You're taking personal risks that go beyond normal CEO responsibilities. Because the threats we're facing go beyond normal business competition. Morrison isn't just stealing data or bad-mouthing us to investors. He's actively trying to destroy everything we've built, and he's not going to stop until someone stops him." "That's what we have security for," James said. "And law enforcement. Security that Morrison bypassed for 18 months. Law enforcement that still hasn't caught him after 3 weeks. Lillian stood up. "I respect your concerns, but I'm not going to apologize for doing what was necessary." She walked out before they could respond, her heart pounding. Behind her, she heard Sarah say something to James, but she didn't stop to listen. Ethan was waiting in her office when she got back, his knee still bandaged but healing. "How bad?" he asked. "Could have been worse. They're worried I'm reckless." "You are reckless. So are you." "Yeah, but I'm not a CEO with a board of directors second-guessing every move." He shifted in his chair. "Martinez called. They traced Morrison's text to a burner phone in New Jersey. By the time they got there, he'd already ditched it." "He's taunting us." "Trying to. Question is why now? Why reveal his location even temporarily, just to send a threat?" Lillian sat down heavily. "Because he wants us scared, wants us looking over our shoulders instead of focusing on rebuilding." "Is it working?" She wanted to say no. Wanted to project the same confidence she'd shown the board. But sitting here with Ethan, who'd been through his own version of this nightmare, she didn't have to pretend. "Yeah," she admitted. "It's working." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "After Redline collapsed, I was paranoid for months. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Took me a long time to realize that's exactly what the fear wanted, to paralyze me, to make me so worried about the next disaster that I couldn't function." "How'd you get past it?" "I didn't. Not completely. I still have days where I'm waiting for everything to fall apart again." He met her eyes. "But I learned to function anyway, to build a life worth protecting even when I was scared of losing it." "Sophie." "Sophie," he agreed. "And now this job, this company, this—" He gestured between them. "Whatever we're building here." Lillian understood what he meant. In 3 weeks, they'd gone from strangers to something else. Not quite friends, because friends didn't usually risk their lives together in burning buildings. Not quite colleagues, because colleagues maintained professional distance. Something in between, something undefined. "Morrison's going to make another move," she said. "Soon." "I know. And we need to be ready when he does." "We will be." She wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe they could anticipate Morrison's next attack, could protect everything they'd fought to save. But the text message sat heavy in her mind, a reminder that somewhere out there, someone was watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her phone buzzed again. Not Morrison this time, Sophie's mother, asking if Ethan could pick up their daughter an hour early today because of a work conflict. "I'll get her," Lillian said before Ethan could respond. "You don't have to. I want to. Besides, I promised I'd help with pickups, remember?" Ethan looked skeptical but nodded. "She gets out at 2:30. Lincoln Elementary, room 104. She'll be expecting me, so you might need to—" "I'll figure it out." She did. Sophie was easy to spot in the crowd of first graders pouring out of the classroom, dark hair and pigtails, purple backpack decorated with stars, looking around for her father with serious brown eyes. "Hi, Sophie," Lillian said, crouching down. "Remember me? I'm Ms. Drake. Your dad asked me to pick you up today. Sophie studied her carefully. Where's Daddy? He's at work. His knee is still healing from when he hurt it helping me. He said he fell. He did, while doing something very brave. Sophie considered this. Then she held out her hand. Okay, but we need to get ice cream. Daddy always gets me ice cream on Tuesdays. Lillian took her hand. Ice cream it is. They stopped at a shop near Sophie's mother's apartment. Sophie ordered strawberry with sprinkles and proceeded to explain in great detail the social dynamics of first-grade recess. Emma says her hamster's the best, but Tyler's hamster can do tricks. I think they're both good hamsters. That's very diplomatic of you. What's diplomatic? It means you're fair to everyone. Sophie thought about this while eating her ice cream. Ms. Drake? You can call me Lillian. Lillian, is my daddy in trouble? The question caught her off guard. What makes you think that? He's been worried. He makes coffee really early when he's worried, and he checks his phone a lot. Sophie looked at her with those two serious eyes. Is it because of you? Lillian didn't know how to answer that. How to explain corporate espionage and arson and death threats to a 6-year-old. Your daddy is helping me with something important, she said carefully. Something that's a little bit dangerous. But he's very good at his job, and we're being careful. Will he get hurt again? I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he doesn't. Sophie nodded slowly, like she was weighing Lillian's words for truth. Okay, but if he does get hurt, I'm going to be mad at you. That's fair. They finished their ice cream, and Lillian drove Sophie to her mother's apartment. A woman answered the door, mid-30s, tired-looking, with Sophie's dark hair and a wariness in her eyes that Lillian recognized. You must be Claire, Lillian said. I'm Lillian Drake. Ethan works for me. Claire's expression shifted through several emotions, surprise, confusion, something that might have been concern. He sent his boss to pick up our daughter? His knee was bothering him from the injury last week. I offered to help. Right. The injury. Claire looked at Sophie, who was already heading inside. I saw the news, the fire. They said... She stopped. They said he was on some kind of platform outside the building. He was helping me save critical data. He could have died. I know. Claire studied her face. Is this job, is it going to keep putting him in danger? Lillian wanted to lie. Wanted to say everything would be fine, that the worst was over, but Claire deserved honesty. I hope not, she said, but I can't promise that. What I can promise is that I'll do everything possible to keep him safe, and that he's making a real difference. He's always trying to make a difference, Claire said quietly. That's what got him in trouble at Redline. He couldn't let it go, couldn't accept that some things are beyond fixing. It destroyed him. I'm not trying to destroy him. Maybe not. But people like you, successful people, you don't always see the cost of what you're asking. Claire's voice wasn't unkind, just tired. Ethan will give everything to help you. He doesn't know how to do anything halfway. So I'm asking you, as the mother of his child, don't let him give so much that there's nothing left. The words hit harder than they should have. Lillian nodded slowly. I'll remember that. When she got back to her car, she sat for a long time thinking about Claire's warning, about Ethan's injured knee and the shadows under his eyes, about the way he threw himself into work like he was still trying to make up for Redline. She pulled out her phone and texted him. Delivered Sophie safely. She says you owe her ice cream. I always owe her ice cream. It's a recurring debt. Claire's worried about you. A longer pause before he responded. Claire's always worried. Comes with the territory. She's not wrong to worry. I know. But I'm okay. Promise. Lillian wanted to believe that, but she'd seen the same determination in his eyes that she saw in her own mirror every morning, the kind that pushed you past reasonable limits because stopping felt like giving up. Her phone rang. Martinez. We found Morrison. Lillian's heart jumped. Where? New Jersey, like we thought. Small town outside Atlantic City. Local police have the place surrounded, but Ms. Drake... Martinez paused. He's not alone. He's in a motel room with enough equipment to launch another cyber attack. And according to our tech team, he's already accessed your network. Everything went cold. When? Within the past hour. He's in your systems right now. Lillian was already calling Ethan before Martinez finished speaking. He answered immediately, and she didn't bother with pleasantries. Morrison's in our network, right now. I know, I'm looking at it. She could hear the rapid clicking of keys in the background. He's attempting to trigger another server wipe, but he's going through systems I've been monitoring. He doesn't know I'm watching. Can you stop him? I can slow him down. But Lillian, if he realizes I'm there, he'll detonate everything at once. We need him to think he's succeeding long enough for the police to... A sound erupted through the phone. Glass shattering, shouting, the unmistakable chaos of a raid in progress. Martinez, what's happening? Lillian demanded. Morrison saw the police. He's... More shouting. He just triggered something. Our tech team says there's massive activity on your network. Ethan! I see it. His voice was tight with concentration. He's initiating a cascading delete across all systems. I'm trying to isolate it, but there's too much happening at once. What do you need? Physical access to the main server room, the one we just moved everything to after the fire. If I can get there, I can manually disconnect before the wipe completes. Lillian was already running for her car. I'm 15 minutes away. You can't drive and... Then tell me what to do when I get there, step by step. She broke every traffic law between Sophie's mother's apartment and the temporary server facility. Her phone was on speaker, Ethan's voice a steady stream of instructions she was trying to memorize while weaving through traffic. The main power junction is in the northwest corner. Big gray box with a red emergency shutoff. You're going to need to... Wait, aren't you coming? Silence. Then, I'm in my car heading to Sophie's school. Claire had to leave early for work, and Sophie's waiting. Ethan, the network, can wait 3 minutes while I make sure my daughter isn't sitting alone wondering where her parents are. His voice was firm. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You can start without me. Lillian wanted to argue. Wanted to say the company was more important than a pickup schedule, but she remembered Claire's words, Sophie's serious eyes, the cost of asking someone to give everything. Okay, she said, 20 minutes. But Ethan, I know, I'm hurrying. She made it to the facility in 12 minutes. Marcus was already there, looking panicked, his team swarming around glowing screens. We've lost 30% of the recovered data, he said. Another 40% is corrupted. If we don't stop this in the next 10 minutes, show me the server room. It was smaller than the old one, temporary and utilitarian. Rows of equipment humming with deadly purpose. Lights blinking red as Morrison's code tore through the system like fire through dry wood. Lillian pulled out her phone, switching to the video call Ethan had initiated. I'm here. Walk me through it. His face appeared on screen and she could see he was driving, Sophie visible in the back seat, looking worried. Daddy, what's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart. Just helping Lillian with something. Can you be quiet for a few minutes? Okay. Ethan's eyes met Lillian's through the screen. See the gray junction box? Yes. Inside there's a series of switches. You need to flip them in sequence or you'll fry everything. Top to bottom, left column first, then right. But you have to wait 5 seconds between each switch. Why? Because the system needs time to redistribute power, or the surge will. Just trust me. 5 seconds. Lillian opened the box. 20 switches, each labeled with technical specifications she didn't understand. Her hands were shaking. First switch, left column, top. She flipped it, started counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Good, next one. They worked through the sequence, Ethan's voice steady and calm despite whatever he was feeling. Sophie was singing quietly in the back seat, some song about butterflies, oblivious to the disaster unfolding. Marcus appeared at Lillian's elbow. Miss Drake, the deletion's accelerating. We're losing data faster than... How much longer? Lillian asked Ethan. 4 more switches. But you need to be precise. If you flip them too fast... I know. 3 more switches, 2 more. 1. Now the emergency shutoff. Big red handle on the right side. Lillian grabbed it and pulled. The entire server room went dark, the sudden silence deafening after the constant hum of equipment. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in red. Did it work? She asked. Marcus was frantically typing on his tablet, using battery power. Checking. His face broke into a smile. We stopped it. 70% of the recovered data is intact. The rest, he swallowed. The rest is gone. But 70% is enough to maintain the case against Hathaway and rebuild our R&D. Lillian's legs went weak. She sat down hard on the floor, phone still clutched in her hand. Ethan? I heard you did it. His voice was warm with relief. Nice work, boss. I had help. She could hear sirens in the background of his call. Is that... Martinez just called. They got Morrison. He tried to run after triggering the wipe, but local police had the perimeter sealed. He's in custody. Something in Lillian's chest unclenched. It's over? This part is. The legal stuff will take months, but yeah, he can't hurt us anymore. Sophie's voice came through the phone. Daddy, can we get pizza? I'm hungry. Ethan laughed, the sound slightly shaky. Yeah, sweetheart, we can get pizza. Can Lillian come? There was a pause. Ethan looked at the camera. Can Lillian come to pizza? Lillian thought about her empty apartment, the office full of chaos, the board meeting tomorrow where she'd have to explain everything. Then she thought about a 6-year-old who'd patiently waited while adults saved the world from digital destruction. Yeah, she said, I can come to pizza. They met at a place near Sophie's school, the kind of family restaurant with checkered tablecloths and crayons for the kids. Sophie commandeered an entire side of the booth, spreading out her coloring supplies like a tiny general planning a campaign. This is my favorite place, she announced. They have good breadsticks. Breadsticks are important, Lillian agreed. Ethan slid in across from her, his knee still bothering him, but his face more relaxed than she'd seen in weeks. So, we saved the company. Again. We seem to be making a habit of it. Not sure that's a good thing. The waitress came, and they ordered pizza for the table, soda for Sophie, beer for the adults because they'd earned it. While they waited, Sophie colored and chattered about her day, and Lillian found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. Emma brought her hamster to school, Sophie said seriously, but it escaped during show and tell, and Mrs. Peterson screamed really loud. Did they catch it? Lillian asked. Yeah, but it pooped in Emma's desk first. Ethan covered his laugh with a cough. That's unfortunate. Emma cried, but I told her it was okay because hamsters can't help it. That was kind of you, Lillian said. Sophie looked up from her coloring. Daddy says you should always be kind to people who are sad, even if their hamster pooped in their desk. That's good advice. The pizza arrived, and for a while they just ate, comfortable in the kind of silence that came from shared exhaustion and relief. Lillian watched Ethan help Sophie cut her pizza into smaller pieces, watched the easy affection between father and daughter, and felt something twist in her chest. She'd spent so long building walls, keeping people at arm's length, believing that success meant sacrificing connection. But sitting here in a cheap pizza place with a man she'd known for less than a month and his 6-year-old daughter, she wondered if maybe she'd been wrong about what mattered. Lillian? Sophie's voice pulled her back. Are you sad? No, sweetie, just tired. Daddy gets tired too. He takes naps sometimes. Adults need naps, Ethan confirmed. It's a scientific fact. After dinner, Lillian walked them to Ethan's car. Sophie hugged her goodbye with the unselfconscious affection of childhood, and Lillian found herself hugging back tighter than she'd expected. Thank you for pizza, Sophie said. Thank you for inviting me. When Sophie was buckled in, Ethan lingered by the driver's door. Tomorrow's going to be rough. The board meeting, the press, all of it. I know. But we'll handle it together. Lillian nodded. Together. He smiled, then got in the car and drove away. Lillian stood in the parking lot for a long time after they left, watching the taillights disappear into traffic, feeling something shift inside her that she couldn't quite name. The board meeting the next morning was exactly as brutal as expected. James opened with a grim recounting of the losses, data, money, reputation. The other members chimed in with concerns and criticisms, each one building on the last until Lillian felt like she was being buried alive in corporate bureaucracy. We've lost investor confidence, someone said. The stock is down 43% from pre-crisis levels, someone else added. Our competitors are circling like sharks. Finally, Lillian held up a hand. Are you finished? The room went quiet. Good, because now you're going to listen. She stood, her voice steady. Yes, we lost data. Yes, we lost money. Yes, this has been a disaster by every conventional metric, but we also survived a coordinated attack by one of our largest competitors. We exposed a criminal conspiracy that spanned 4 years. We recovered 70% of stolen intellectual property that would have cost billions to redevelop. And we did it without compromising our core values or sacrificing the people who work here. That's a very optimistic spin on, Gerald's replacement started to say. It's not spin, it's reality. Lillian pulled out the financial projections Patricia had helped her prepare. We're projecting a full recovery within 18 months. Our remaining R&D pipeline is stronger than ever, and the publicity from exposing Hathaway has actually increased interest from investors who want to partner with a company that fights back. Sarah Kim leaned forward. What about the security vulnerabilities? How do we know this won't happen again? Because we're completely rebuilding our security infrastructure from the ground up. Ethan Cole is leading the effort, and I trust him more than I trust anyone in this room. That caused some murmuring. James cleared his throat. That's quite a statement. It's an earned statement. He's proven himself repeatedly. He saw patterns no one else caught. He risked his life to protect our assets. And he did all of it while maintaining his responsibilities as a single father. Lillian looked around the table. Most of you have questioned my judgment over the past month. My hiring decisions, my crisis management, my leadership. And maybe you're right to question, but I'm asking you to trust me one more time. Give me 6 months to prove we can come back stronger. Mit pachamu momos. And if you can't, James asked quietly, then I'll resign. No fight, no argument. I'll step down and let someone else lead. The silence was heavy. Then Sarah raised her hand. I vote we give her the 6 months. Seconded, said Marcus, who'd been quiet until now. James looked around the room. All in favor? 7 hands went up. 3 stayed down. 2 abstained. You have your 6 months, James said. Don't waste them. Lillian left the boardroom feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Patricia was waiting outside with coffee and a satisfied smile. You played that perfectly. I just told them the truth. The truth with excellent framing. That's my specialty. Patricia handed her the coffee. Martinez called. Morrison's cooperating, giving up everyone involved in the scheme in exchange for a reduced sentence. We're going to have enough evidence to bury Hathaway for decades. Good. And the press wants a statement. I'm thinking we go with triumphant but humble, acknowledging the challenges while emphasizing our resilience. Patricia. What? Thank you for everything. I couldn't have survived this without you. Patricia's expression softened. You're welcome. Now go home and sleep for 12 hours. You look like death. Lillian did go home, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept thinking about the past month, about everything that had changed, about the janitor who'd spilled water on her laptop and somehow saved everything. Around midnight, she texted Ethan. You awake? He responded immediately. Unfortunately, yes. Sophie had a nightmare about escaped hamsters. Everything okay? She's fine now, back asleep. You? Can't sleep, keep replaying everything. Want to talk about it? Instead of texting back, she called. He answered on the second ring, his voice quiet so as not to wake Sophie. Hey. Hey. Lillian walked to her window, looking out at the city. I've been thinking. Dangerous pastime. I'm serious. I've been thinking about what Claire said, about the cost of what I'm asking from you. Ethan was quiet for a moment. What brought this on? You picked up Sophie in the middle of a crisis. You put her first, even though it meant leaving me to handle the server shutdown alone. And I realized that's not weakness. That's strength. Knowing what matters and protecting it, even when there's pressure to sacrifice it. Lillian, I've spent my entire career sacrificing everything for success. Relationships, sleep, health, happiness, all of it went on the altar of building this company. And I told myself it was worth it because look what I achieved. But sitting in that pizza place last night, watching you with Sophie, I wondered if maybe I've been measuring success wrong. You built something incredible, Ethan said softly. Don't diminish that. I'm not. I'm realizing there's room for more than just work. That maybe the strongest leaders aren't the ones who give everything to the job. They're the ones who know when to step back and let themselves be human. She could hear him smile through the phone. Is this you asking for a work-life balance? This is me acknowledging that I don't know how to have one. And maybe, she hesitated. Maybe you could teach me. The silence stretched, comfortable and warm. I'd like that, Ethan said finally. But fair warning, My version of work-life balance involves a lot of first-grade recitals and hamster-related emergencies. I can live with that. They talked for another hour about nothing and everything. About Sophie's upcoming birthday party and the security restructuring plan and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. By the time they hung up, Lillian felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope that didn't come with a business plan attached. The next 6 months were a blur of rebuilding. New security protocols implemented across every system, staff changes as they let go of people who'd been compromised and hired fresh talent who understood the new reality. Court proceedings as Hathaway's case wound through the legal system, each revelation more damning than the last. Through it all, Ethan was there, sometimes literally at her side in meetings and strategy sessions, sometimes just a text message away when she needed someone to talk to at 2 a.m. He pushed back when she worked too hard, reminded her to eat lunch, and once physically removed her laptop when she tried to work through Sophie's school play. "You promised," he said firmly. "She made you a butterfly wing costume and everything." So Lillian went to the school play, wearing ridiculous cardboard butterfly wings that Sophie had decorated with markers, and watched her perform a song about caterpillars with more enthusiasm than pitch. And afterward, when Sophie hugged her and said, "You came," Lillian understood what she'd been missing all those years of chasing success. The company recovered faster than projected. Investors who'd fled came back bringing friends. The publicity from exposing Hathaway positioned them as a company with integrity, willing to fight for what was right, even at great cost. Their stock not only recovered but surpassed pre-crisis levels. At the 6-month mark, James called her into his office. "You did it," he said simply. "Everything you promised and more. The board is impressed." "Thank you. There's talk of making you permanent CEO. Not interim, not probationary. The real thing." He studied her face. "How do you feel about that?" Lillian thought about it. 6 months ago, she would have said yes immediately, would have grabbed the title with both hands and never let go. But now, "I want it," she said, "but on my terms. Reasonable hours, delegation of responsibilities, trust in the team I've built. I won't sacrifice everything for this job anymore." James smiled. "That's exactly the kind of CEO we need, someone who knows the difference between dedication and destruction." The official announcement came 2 weeks later. Lillian Drake, permanent CEO. The press conference was well attended, cameras flashing as she took questions about the future. "How do you plan to prevent another security breach?" "By maintaining vigilance without paranoia. By trusting the right people and holding them accountable." "What's your message to other companies facing similar threats?" "Fight back. Don't let fear paralyze you. Don't let criminals think they can destroy what you've built without consequences." "What about your personal life? Can you balance this role with—" "Yes," Lillian interrupted. "I can. Because I've learned that the strongest leaders aren't the ones who give everything to the job. They're the ones who know what's worth protecting outside of work, too." After the press conference, she found Ethan waiting in her office with 2 cups of coffee and a smile. "Congratulations, Madam CEO." "Thank you, Director Cole." She took the coffee. "Although, technically, I've been CEO this whole time. But now it's official, that's different." "Is it?" "Means you can't fire me as easily." She laughed. "I was never going to fire you. Even when I spilled water on your laptop?" "Especially then." They stood at the window together, looking out at the city. A year ago, Lillian had stood in this same spot, alone and stressed and convinced that isolation was the price of success. Now she had Ethan beside her, had Sophie's artwork on her desk, had a team she trusted, and a life outside these walls. "You know what I realized?" Lillian said quietly. "What?" "That night you spilled the water, you didn't just save the company, you saved me. From becoming the kind of person who sacrifices everything and calls it strength. From building an empire on a foundation of loneliness." Ethan was quiet for a moment, then he said, "You saved me too. Gave me a second chance when no one else would. Let me prove that one failure doesn't define a person." "We saved each other then." "Yeah, we did." The city spread out below them, lights beginning to flicker on as evening approached. Somewhere down there, people were living their lives, making their own choices about what mattered and what didn't. Lillian had spent so long thinking she knew the answer, thinking success was the only thing worth chasing. But standing here with Ethan, knowing Sophie was at her mother's place, doing homework and complaining about it, knowing her team was downstairs working hard but planning to leave at reasonable hours, knowing she'd built something that could survive attacks because the foundation was people instead of just profits, this felt like success too. Different than she'd imagined, but better. I have to pick up Sophie in an hour, Ethan said. Want to come? I have that investor call. Yeah, which can be rescheduled. The investors will wait. Sophie won't. Lillian pulled out her phone and sent a quick message to Patricia, rescheduling the call for tomorrow. Okay, let's go. They left the building together, walking through the lobby where Henderson nodded respectfully, where staff were packing up for the day instead of settling in for another all-nighter. The evening air was cool, carrying the promise of summer rain. You think Morrison regrets it? Lillian asked as they walked. All of it? Probably not. People like Morrison don't think they did anything wrong. They justify everything as just business. Ethan shrugged. But Hathaway's lawyers keep trying to cut deals, which suggests at least one of them regrets getting caught. Justice system's too slow. Justice usually is, but it's coming. They picked up Sophie from aftercare, and she immediately started talking about her day at roughly 1,000,000 words per minute. Something about science class and a volcano project, and how Tyler's volcano exploded early and got baking soda on the ceiling. Did yours explode right? Lillian asked. Mine was perfect. I used the exact measurements. Sophie looked proud. Daddy says measurements are important. Daddy's right. They stopped for takeout. Chinese this time because Sophie had declared herself tired of pizza, and ate it at Ethan's apartment while Sophie showed Lillian her volcano project photos on a tablet. The apartment was small but comfortable, the kind of place that prioritized function over style. Sophie's drawings covered the refrigerator. Books were stacked on every surface. It felt lived in and real in a way Lillian's sterile apartment never had. You should get a hamster, Sophie announced while they ate. Everyone should have a pet. I don't know if I have time for a hamster, Lillian said. Hamsters don't take much time. Emma's hamster mostly just sleeps and eats. Sounds like a good pet for a busy person. After dinner, Sophie wanted to show Lillian her room, which was exactly as chaotic as expected for a 6-year-old. Stuffed animals everywhere, art supplies scattered across the desk, a bookshelf overflowing with stories about magic and adventure. This is Mr. Rabbit, Sophie said, holding up the well-loved stuffed animal Lillian remembered from their first meeting. I've had him since I was a baby. He looks very wise. He is. He helps me when I have bad dreams. Lillian sat on the edge of Sophie's bed. What do you have bad dreams about? Sophie climbed up next to her. Mr. Rabbit clutched tight. Sometimes I dream that Daddy doesn't come pick me up, that I'm waiting and he never comes. Lillian's heart twisted. Your daddy would never leave you waiting. I know, but sometimes I still worry. Sophie looked up at her with those serious eyes. Do you worry about things even when you know they're not real? All the time. What do you do when you're worried? Lillian thought about all the sleepless nights, the anxiety attacks she'd hidden in bathroom stalls, the weight of responsibility that sometimes felt like drowning. I talk to people I trust, like your daddy. He helps me remember that I don't have to handle everything alone. Sophie nodded sagely. Daddy's good at helping. He really is. When Sophie finally went to bed, Lillian found Ethan cleaning up the kitchen. She grabbed a towel and started drying dishes without being asked. You don't have to do that, he said. I want to. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Ethan said, Thank you. For today. For every day, really. For what? For seeing me as more than just the guy who failed at Redline. For trusting me when you had no reason to. For... He paused. For making me feel like I matter, not just as an employee, but as a person. Lillian set down the dish she was drying. You do matter, more than you know. He turned to face her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. Can I tell you something? Always. That night I spilled water on your laptop. It wasn't completely an accident. Lillian's eyebrows rose. What? I'd been watching the network traffic for weeks. I knew something was wrong. And when I saw you in that conference room alone, saw the pattern of the data transfer starting. He ran a hand through his hair. I knew if I could interrupt it, even for a second, I might see what was really happening. So I let the cartwheel catch, let the bucket tip. made it look like clumsiness, when really it was the only way I could think to help without revealing I'd been monitoring systems I technically shouldn't have access to. A ski... Lillian stared at him. You staged the whole thing. The water, yes. The breach was real. The danger was real. But the spill, that was intentional. And I've felt guilty about lying ever since. She should probably be angry. Should call him out for the deception. But instead she started laughing. What? Ethan looked worried. Why are you laughing? Because you're terrible at being invisible. You couldn't just watch and do nothing. You had to intervene, even if it meant making yourself look incompetent. She shook her head. That's the least invisible thing you could have done. I know, it was stupid. It was brave. And it worked. And it brought you into my life at exactly the moment I needed someone willing to take risks for the right reasons. She stepped closer. So thank you for the intentional clumsiness. He smiled, relief flooding his face. You're not mad? I'm grateful. They stood there in his small kitchen, the space between them charged with something that had been building for months. Lillian could hear the distant sound of rain starting outside, could see her reflection in the dark window behind Ethan's shoulder. I should go, she said, not moving. You should, he agreed, also not moving. It's late. It is. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched, fragile and heavy with possibility. Then Ethan reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Lillian, whatever he was going to say was interrupted by Sophie's voice from her bedroom. Daddy, I can't sleep. Ethan stepped back, the spell broken, but not shattered. I should go, she needs you. He went to Sophie's room and Lillian heard their voices, his low and soothing, hers small and sleepy. She gathered her things, preparing to leave, but Ethan reappeared before she made it to the door. She wants to say goodnight to you too. Lillian followed him back to Sophie's room. The little girl was tucked into bed, Mr. Rabbit under one arm, looking very small and very young. Good night, Sophie. Will you come back? Sophie asked. Not for work, just to visit. Lillian glanced at Ethan, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Yeah, she said. I'll come back. Promise? Promise. Sophie smiled and closed her eyes. Good. Because I like you. I like you too, sweetheart. Ethan walked her to the door. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the windows. I meant what I said earlier, he told her quietly. About you mattering. About all of this mattering. I know. Lillian looked up at him, at this man who'd entered her life through an act of deliberate clumsiness and somehow become essential. I'll see you tomorrow? Tomorrow, and every day after that. She drove home through the rain, her mind full of everything that had happened and everything that might happen next. The company was stable. The threats were neutralized. She had a team she trusted and a life that extended beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. But more than that, she had people who mattered. Ethan, who understood the weight of second chances. Sophie, who reminded her what was worth protecting. Patricia, Marcus, Henderson, all the people who'd stood by her when everything was falling apart. Success, Lillian realized, wasn't about building an empire that could withstand any attack. It was about building a life worth defending, about knowing the difference between what could be replaced and what was irreplaceable. A year later, almost to the day, Lillian stood in the same conference room where it had all started. The board was assembled for their annual review, but this time the atmosphere was different, relaxed, almost celebratory. Revenue is up 62% from pre-crisis levels, James announced. Stock prices have stabilized at historic highs. Employee retention is the best we've seen in a decade. He looked at Lillian. I don't think anyone can argue with these results. The team deserves the credit, Lillian said. I'm just the one who learned to get out of their way. After the meeting, she found Ethan in his new office, bigger than his first one, with actual windows and a door that closed. Sophie's latest artwork was already decorating the walls. How'd it go? He asked. They love us. We're officially unstoppable. Until the next crisis. Probably, but we'll handle it together. He stood and walked around the desk. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. About us. Lillian's heart jumped. Okay. Sophie asked me this morning why you don't come to dinner every night anymore. And I realized I've been keeping distance because I didn't want to complicate our working relationship. Didn't want to risk what we've built professionally by admitting that personally, he paused, that I want more. If you do. Lillian had spent a year learning to trust, learning to let people in, learning that strength wasn't about standing alone. I want more, she said simply. His smile could have powered the entire building. Yeah? Yeah. But Ethan, I'm still going to be terrible at work-life balance. I'm still going to want to fix every problem myself. I'm still going to be stubborn and difficult and probably a nightmare to date. Good thing I like a challenge. And Sophie loves you already, has for months. How do you know? Because she asked if you could be her bonus mom. Those were her exact words. Bonus mom. Lillian felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to be anyone's mom. Neither did I when she was born. We figured it out together. He took her hand. That's what we do, right? Figure things out together. She thought about the past year, all the crises they'd navigated, all the late nights and early mornings, all the moments when giving up would have been easier than pushing forward. They'd rebuilt a company, yes, but more than that, they'd built something between them, trust and partnership, and something that felt like coming home. Together, she agreed. 6 months after that, on a rainy Tuesday that felt like the universe's sense of humor, they made it official. Not with a big wedding or dramatic announcement, just a quiet ceremony in the office courtyard with Sophie as the flower girl and Mr. Rabbit as the ring bearer. Patricia cried. Marcus made an awkward toast about network security being a foundation for lasting relationships. Henderson looked uncomfortable in his suit but smiled anyway. Standing there in the rain, because of course it was raining, because nothing in Lillian's life had ever gone smoothly, she thought about the night it all started. The conference room on the 47th floor, the janitor with the cleaning cart, the spilled water that had looked like disaster but was really salvation. You broke everything that night, she said to Ethan, echoing words she'd spoken months ago on this same rooftop. He smiled and pulled her close, rain dripping from both their faces. So we could rebuild it right. And this time neither of them was alone. Because that was the real lesson Lillian had learned. The real truth that had taken a corporate crisis and a janitor's deliberate clumsiness to teach her. Success wasn't about being strong enough to stand alone. It was about being brave enough to let yourself be held up when you couldn't stand. It was about building something worth protecting, not just a company, but a life. Not just a career, but connections that made the hard days bearable and the good days better. The water hadn't destroyed anything. It had washed away the illusion that she had to carry everything herself, and in its place had grown something real and messy and perfectly imperfect, a family built from crisis and choice, from trust earned in burning buildings and quiet pizza dinners, from two broken people who'd found a way to be whole together. Sophie tugged on Lillian's dress. Can we have cake now? Yeah, sweetheart, Lillian said, squeezing Ethan's hand. We can have cake now. They walked inside together, leaving the rain behind, ready for whatever came next. Because they'd learned the hard way that disasters happened, that threats emerged, that nothing worth having came without risk. But they'd also learned that the right people made any challenge survivable. That trust was stronger than fear. That sometimes the person you needed most showed up pushing a cleaning cart and changed everything. The company would face new threats. There would be more late nights, more crises, more moments when everything hung by a thread. But Lillian wasn't afraid anymore. She had Ethan watching the patterns no one else saw. She had Sophie reminding her what mattered beyond quarterly earnings. She had a team who trusted her because she'd learned to trust them back. And on the nights when the weight felt too heavy, when doubt crept in, she'd remember the man who'd spilled water on her laptop and saved her entire world. She'd remember that the strongest foundations were built not on perfection, but on people willing to show up for each other, messy, flawed, and perfectly human. That was the real story. Not about a CEO who saved her company, but about a woman who learned that being saved wasn't weakness. About a janitor who proved that second chances were real if you were brave enough to take them. About a little girl who taught both of them that love was the best measurement of success. And about how sometimes the worst moments of your life were really just the beginning of something better. If you let yourself trust the people who stayed when everything fell apart and helped you rebuild it into something worth keeping.